there was this direct program undertaken, directed against the American people. It's a full-scale, demonstrated, documented, proven campaign.
This is Danny Sheehan, and he's not just any attorney. He's a lawyer that's been involved in America's most high-profile cases, the Pentagon Papers, the Iran-Contra scandal, Watergate, and most recently, the UFO whistleblowers. He has literally battled the national security state for decades, and he's the man that insiders call when the truth gets too crazy. Danny has spent years inside the rooms that most Americans don't even know exist, briefing military officials, advising UFO whistleblowers, and seeing evidence that the public still has never heard about. So do you believe that the government is in possession of recovered aircraft?
Oh, I'm absolutely positive there. I've seen photographs of them.
And today we're diving into the questions that everyone is asking, but only a few men can answer. Has the US government recovered non-human aircraft? Who is actually controlling the UFO secrecy? How deep does the government's misinformation campaign go? And why is UFO disclosure suddenly becoming bipartisan? If you think you know the UFO story, just wait, because Danny Sheehan is here to show us the version that never makes it to the press conferences. This episode is fascinating and has something for everyone. Danny is truly one of the sharpest minds in law, politics, and UFO disclosure, and today he's showing us everything he knows. So sit back, relax, and welcome to camp. Danny Sheehan, thank you so much for joining me.
Terrific.
I'm very, very excited. I'm honored that you're in the tent today.
Oh, you don't have to be honored.
Okay, fine, I won't be.
Yeah.
You've had a fascinating career from, such high profile cases, the Pentagon Papers, working in Watergate, and maybe more recently and more notably within the internet space, working on a lot of UAP and UFO cases.
Yes.
Oftentimes defending whistleblowers and people that are caught in the crossfire between the big guys in the government and the people trying to get information out.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to talk about all of that as it relates to consciousness and spirituality and going through all the different theories as to what exactly this phenomena is. What are extraterrestrials? Do they exist in, a physical form? Do they exist in the minds of the people who have seen them, or do they not exist at all? And where is that information truly being held?
Is that the list? Is that all? It goes off in lots of subcategories.
I can only imagine. I have a feeling we're going to get into it. There's probably many people listening that have some skepticism, and I can speak for myself that I see a ton of things coming out of the Pentagon and different papers being released as far as these UAPs, and we're not sure exactly what they are. The Go Fast video, David Grush's disclosure as a whistleblower. And on the one hand, there's something happening that is very strange. And I've spoken with individual experiencers that have had these profound experiences, whether being visited by some type of extraterrestrial, waking up in their sleep and seeing a Nordic-looking person speaking to them, telling them to be concerned about the environment and nuclear war. But yet there's still sort of this difficulty really putting your thumb on what is happening and what this experience is. And for me, I kind of exist in sort of this fluid state where I don't really know how to parse all of this. So in your experience dealing with these people and being in, these closed briefs where, everyone is signed to an NDA except yourself.
Right.
What can you tell me about this phenomenon as far as extraterrestrials? What exactly are they, to your understanding? Do they exist? And what are the most compelling pieces of evidence that would make you believe your worldview?
Okay. Well, one of the first things we have to do is get past this effort on the part of the national security state to obfuscate what we're talking about, that they've changed the UFO issue. You go to the average fifth grader and ask them to draw a UFO, and they'll draw it for you. And you ask them to draw, an alien, and they'll draw you one. With the big eyes and the big head and all that. But the national security state people now have said, "Oh no, let's not call them UFOs because that's got a stigma attached to it," which we've now proven they're the ones created it.
Right.
That we've gotten all the documents now that Richard Dolan, in his 2-volume work called UFOs in the National Security State, has actually extracted through the Freedom of Information Act lawsuits the documents that show that there was a conscious program organized by the Central Intelligence Agency's Operations Directorate and the Pentagon to actually attack and savage anybody who tried to reveal the reality of the UFOs. Okay, because they'd attached themselves to keeping it secret because they wanted to back engineer the technology to make a secret weapons system of it. And so they convinced themselves, oh, look, we're the guardians of a new secret weapons system development program like the Manhattan Project, and you can't let anybody know about it. And so they've actually convinced themselves that they're authorized to use lethal force, if necessary, to silence anybody who's trying to reveal the secret. Okay, so they had this extremely sophisticated psyops operation going on to poison the well on the part of everybody in the country against the reality of UFOs, to lead people to believe that anybody that believed that UFOs were real were mentally ill, literally mentally ill. They actually had a protocol in the military. Any officer who wanted to report an actual UFO encounter, if they insisted upon filing an official encounter report in writing, that the first thing happened is they were required to take a psychiatric test. And it would go right into your record.
That'd make me be quiet.
Yeah, well, it made all of them be quiet mostly. And then if you still insist upon it and they make you go take the psychiatric test, then what they do is they deny you of your next promotion. They deny you, ultimately they take your security clearance away. They'll take your pension away. And they have this entire panoply of retaliations that they take, and so that they were suppressing the information. But equally importantly to all that is there was this direct program undertaken directed against the American people, and so that this kind of skeptical response that you have when you hear about any of this information, you sit there with a person who's a 30-year police officer, in your town, who said, well, a UFO landed in this field and I was called in, there they were, and here's what they looked like. And, I filed the report, and you go, oh, I don't know. This is kind of hard to believe, and what you're doing is you're responding to the programming that you've been subjected to by the national security state. It's a full-scale, demonstrated, documented, proven campaign that they mounted against the American people. And so people are very responsive to that now. Myself personally, I started out, just as a young kid, up in northern New York, looking up when I was old enough to be outdoors at night, you can see the stars in the Milky Way, and you're going, holy mackerel, when you realize that each one of these is a sun, this is like our sun that's got like planets going around it. I mean, I was convinced that they had planets going around them because I knew what a solar system looked like even when I was 7 years old, and so I said, oh, wow, then that means that there's got to be like people on some of them, and so just think, you pick one of these stars out at night and you just concentrate on it, you see it kind of pulsing there in the night, thinking about the planets going around it, and if there are someone standing on one of their planets looking up into their nighttime sky, seeing our star, wondering what it's like on our planet. And this was just absolutely fascinating to me. And then I started finding out about all these weird things that we were doing to each other, drawing a line in the sand or in the dirt, saying, if you step over onto this side, I'm going to use my intellect to dig into the earth and pull out metals and melt them down and put them with gunpowder and shoot bullets into you and kill you, for coming into my territory. And you're going, excuse me, I said, look up. Look up and kind of keep a perspective on where we are here, and so that all through my life, I was saying this is bizarre how we're acting toward each other, and that I wanted to help get people to maintain kind of a larger perspective on where we were. So I said, okay, what I'll do is I'll become an astronomer. And I'll figure out, what all these stars are and where the right ones are, where they are, and all that. And I realized that's an awful lot of math, and I was good at math, but I didn't like it. So then I discovered that you could be an astronaut. By the time I got 9 years old, it turns out that they founded the United States Air Force Academy. So I said, oh, good, I'll go to the Air Force Academy. I'll just focus on this, figure out what the courses are I need to take and do all that. And so I ended up becoming one of the top 3, at least, candidates for the U.S. Air Force for the state of New York, back in 1963. When I graduated from high school. So I get to go talk to Jacob Javits, right? The Republican senator. So I go down, sit down, come down to New York City, go to his little office on Fifth Avenue, and I go in, and he says, Danny, he said, why do you want to go to the Air Force Academy? I said, well, because, I want to become an astronaut. And he goes, oh, yes, all young boys want to be an astronaut now. John Glenn went around. And I said, no, I've wanted to do this since I was like 5 years old. And he said, well, why do you want to do that? And I said, well, because I said, in our lifetimes, we're going to actually be encountering beings from an extraterrestrial star system, and this is the most exciting thing that's going to be happening in my entire lifetime. I really would like to be part of that, so I can go out and become part of getting to meet these other people. He said, you actually believe that there's other beings on these other star systems? And I said, well, sure. I said, so must you. You're a United States Senator. You gotta know that. And he was so flummoxed. I mean, he was completely astounded that I said that to him for some reason. That he said, look, Dan, he said, I wasn't expecting this. He said, you're from this little school way up in the boonies of New York. I wasn't expecting this kind of a conversation. So let me be candid with you. I said, look, I've already given the appointment to the son of my primary financial backer. He says, that's the way it is up here. He said, I'll give you the appointment to the Naval Academy, and I said, I'm not into boats, I'm into airplanes. I want to become a pilot and get to be an astronaut. He said, no, he says, you can be a pilot in the Navy. And I said, but still all the boats and stuff. And I wanted, so he said, oh, all right, well, look, you can just go take your appointment from the congressman. There's 42 congressmen in New York. You can get, who is your congressman? I said, it's whoever it was. And he said, oh, I know him. He said, I'll call him. And so it turns out the congressman gives the appointment to the son of the Republican mayor of Glens Falls.
Yep.
And I'm saying, wow, what is this? I said, that, I was like possibly even number one. I knew I was one of the top three guys. I said, and they give the appointment to the kid who's number 7 in our congressional district. I mean, this is not the way to pick the best people to go to the academy, to do whatever it is we're supposed to be doing for the country. So I guess I better become a lawyer and figure out how the government is supposed to be working and make sure that it's working better. And I can help get the government back into tune. And then I can go back into becoming an astronaut. And so I got out practicing in the world and ended up, doing the Pentagon Papers case and, the Watergate burglary and all that kind of stuff. And I realized that our country wasn't just a little bit out of tune. It was playing a completely different song than we'd been told, and then there was this whole thing going on with our country that we were a national security state that had 800 military bases around the world, that we were, invading other people's countries. We were assassinating the political officials of other countries because they wouldn't give our corporations access to their resources. I was flabbergasted. And so as I got farther and farther into trying to fix this thing, I became closer and closer and closer to the core of what it is that's really going on, which has led me to the UFO issue. Because it turns out the UFO issue is the deepest and the most closely guarded secret in the entire government of the United States.
So do you believe that the government is in possession of recovered aircraft?
Oh, I'm absolutely positive they are. I've seen photographs of them.
And where have you seen these photographs?
In the classified portion of Project Blue Book.
And so what can you tell me about this? Like what level of certainty do you have? What did it look like?
Well, it was I came upon where it was a classic UFO with the big dome on the top and the big, must have been like 30 meters across, and it had skidded across this big snow-covered field, and it plowed this great big ditch through the field. You can see the dirt. It was kicked up into the snow, and it was stuck in this embankment, sticking up at like a 45-degree angle. And I saw that there were multiple photographs of it. It was a retrieval. It was a crashed retrieval. You could see U.S. Air Force personnel all around it, taking photographs of it, and actually a movie camera they had going of it with the 2 little canisters on the top. So it was like, I don't know, late 50s or something, or early 50s. So I saw it, and I traced the symbols that were on the bottom of the dome of this UFO. And I brought him back to Jesuit headquarters. I was a general counsel at the Jesuit headquarters at the time in their social ministry office. And I showed him to Father Bill Davis, my superior, and he just bent down and slid open the drawer of his desk and pulled out this little 8.5 by 11 manila envelope with a little clasp on it and handed it to me. And I unclasped it and pulled out this 8.5 by 11 black and white photograph of a UFO in flight, And I said to Father Davis, I said, where did you get this? And he said, my sister Dodie gave it to me. And I said, well, where did Dodie get it? She said, she got it from Mike, her husband, who's the chief air traffic controller in the Seattle airport. And I said, well, where'd Mike get it? He said, he got it from his best friend, who's a cargo pilot, flies cargo all around the Northwest. He took this picture right out the window of his plane, he said, and he brought his little camera to the drugstore to get it developed. This is how you used to do it back then. And when he realized what he had, a photograph of this UFO, he didn't want to get in trouble. He didn't want to lose his license, his pilot license, so he took it and gave it to his best friend, who was the head of the air traffic controllers at the Seattle airport. And then Mike didn't want to get in trouble and lose his job, so he took it and gave it to his sister or his wife, Dodie, and said, "Here, bring this and give it to your brother. He's a priest." And so that's how I got it. And so I started getting those photographs. I got retained by Dr. John Mack, who was at Harvard University, was the head of the Department of Clinical Psychiatry. He's the guy to whom they were sending these officers whenever they would insist upon filing a UFO claim. And so he was having to be the one that administered these psychiatric tests, the battery of psychiatric tests. And after he'd done half a dozen of these, he was kind of thunderstruck. Say, wait a second, these guys are all testing out as being within the normal parameters of psychiatric health, and yet they've all got this story that they're telling about seeing these things. He said, this is astonishing. So he started looking into it, and he was talking to his mother about it, actually. And his mother said, "Oh, you ought to talk to the Hopkins boy." They were family friends, and Bud Hopkins was this guy down in New York City. He was from a very wealthy family, and he was an artist, a sculptor and a painter, but he had this avocation of interviewing people who had had direct contact experiences, at least they thought. So he had gathered all of these interviews, which he tape recorded, of all these different people. And so when John Mack called him, he got to hear some of these and meet some of these people. So he ended up interviewing over 100 people. And he, wrote a paper to submit to the New England Journal of Medicine, the #1 peer-reviewed medical journal in the country. And John had written numerous articles before there, scientific articles, right? And he sent it in, and they sent it right back to him and said, we're not going to print this. And he said, well, here, let me flesh it out a little bit more. I'll put in some more footnotes. I put some more examples in, and he sent it back in. And 2 days later, the executive secretary for Arnold Relman, who was the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, sends it back to him. And she comes into his office and says, "Here, Dr. Relman wanted me to hand this to you personally and point out that it has not been opened."
Wow.
And making clear that we're not only not going to print this, we're not even going to open it. And so John was so offended that he contacted a publisher, because he had won the Pulitzer Prize already. He won the Pulitzer Prize for writing the definitive psychobiography of T.E. Lawrence. Lawrence of Arabia. He's the one that wrote the major analysis of him. And so he got it published. And as soon as it got published, the dean of the medical school comes into his office and invites him to come to a meeting to talk about this book he just wrote. And so John says, "Oh, this is good. I'll get to come and meet with the dean and explain this all to him." And the dean said, "Why don't we just have some more people from the faculty come in, and we can talk to all of them." And John said, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to have like this little grand rounds here about the UFO thing." And he shows up, and it's like a tribunal, not like a tribunal. It was a tribunal. Here they were, arrayed up on this dais, right? And you've got not only the dean of the medical school, but sitting right next to him is legal counsel for Harvard University.
Wow.
And Dr. John Relman. who was the head of the New England Journal of Medicine, who was a visiting scholar at the university, and then 3 or 4 other members of the faculty, and they just started to excoriate him, about writing this book about these people that were thinking they were having this contact. He said, you were actually giving the impression that you believed them. And John was trying to explain to them that, well, it's absolutely real to them, whatever is going on here. What I was doing is opening the question of what is this? What's actually happening?
He didn't make any conclusion in the paper that UAPs or UFOs are legitimate or that aliens have been here. He just said that these people were not clinically insane.
That's right. These people are not clinically mentally ill, and they're genuinely having this experience, and it's very real to them, and it's extraordinarily puzzling. And what he began to do is, when he was interviewing any of these people, he would never hypnotize them. So he couldn't be accused of kind of planting some ideas in them. He said, but what he did is he did this, what they call holotropic breath work. It's this deep breathing exercise that Stanislav Grof developed. He's a European psychiatrist. And it gets people into a very, very calm state so they can remember all kinds of details of things. And that's what he would do. And so he was trying to explain this to the board, and they were demanding that he bring in tape recordings of any of the interviews that he had with these people and tell them whether he ever had charged them for it. Did he have them sign a paper knowing he was using them as a part of an... They were just after him. And so he ended up calling his best friend, Ron Robertson, who had been his best man at his wedding and everything. He was a professor at the Santa Barbara City College out in California. And Ron Robertson had come to a number of lectures that I had delivered, at the university in Santa Barbara about the Karen Silkwood case that we did against nuclear power plants, or the Watergate burglary case that I did, or the Iran-Contra case that I did, against the Enterprise. I'd done a number of these cases. And Ron Robertson had come to know us. So Ron Robertson said to him, well, wait a second. He said, I've met this Danny Sheehan. Would you be interested in having him represent you in front of this committee? And John said, oh, I don't think he would be interested in doing something like this, And so Ron Robertson called me up and asked me to come to dinner at his house. And so I went to dinner, and we got toward the dessert time at dinner. And he said, Danny, do you mind if I ask you a personal question? I said, no, you can ask me anything you want. And he said, what do you think of this UFO issue? I said, I think it's the most important public policy question that there is in the whole world. He said, really? He said, how come you've never said anything about it? I said, well, you never asked me, And so the bottom line is, he had John Mack call me, and I went in to represent John in front of the committee. And one of the things that I got to do on behalf of John Mack was go around interviewing people to become witnesses for him. That we were going to present the witnesses, bring in police officers, bring in the head investigator for the Federal Aviation Agency, bring in, 2-star generals, in the Air Force, bring in the people that were at the Maelstrom rocket missile base where all the missiles were shut off by a UFO. I knew who these people were, right? And so I got to interview all these people, and I got to interview virtually every illuminary, in the field at the time, Dr. Stanton Friedman, Dr. Stephen Greer, David Jacobs, all of them. So I got to know them, and I was preparing them to testify in front of this committee. And the legal counsel for Harvard University, I stood up in one of the meetings. I said, excuse me. I said, I'm not exactly sure what this tribunal is exactly. I said, it's certainly not an AAUP convened panel from the Association of American University Professors, that is necessary if you're going to challenge the tenure of a tenured faculty member. I don't know what this is actually, and so Relman, Relman, who was John Relman, who was actually chairing the committee, the head of the New England Journal of Medicine, said, well, what it was is, Dr. Mack wrote this book, and when it hit the stands, a number of people started calling the dean here, asking him questions about it, he wasn't able to answer their questions. And so he thought, why didn't he just have a conversation with John? And as long as he's going to be having a conversation, why not have some other members of the family? I mean, he's trying to come up with this kind of bullshit line about this is just a friendly conversation, after they'd already been excoriating him for doing this. And so I said, okay, I said, then in the spirit of fairness here, then who was it that called? And there was this big dead silence kind of fell over the room for like about 20 seconds. And finally the legal counsel shakes her head like this, no, at the problem. He says, I'm sorry. He said, we're not at liberty to discuss who called. And I said, okay, well, in the spirit of trying to be of assistance, if they were asking questions that he needed to get the answers to, what were the questions that they were asking? Big long pause, nothing. Shaking her head, no. And he said, I'm sorry, we're not at liberty to discuss that either. And so I said, well, look, let me ask you this. I said, whatever the nature of this tribunal is, I said, is either one or both of the following fact questions going to be at issue here in the course of these hearings? Number one, whether extraterrestrial intelligence exists. And secondly, whether at least some of these sightings of these UFO vehicles might actually be a vehicle from an extraterrestrial civilization. And Relman says, well, they absolutely are going to be relevant. He said, and it's completely ridiculous to think that either one of those things is true, he said. So, I mean, this is Harvard University, like in 1994. And I was just kind of thunderstruck that they could be so completely abysmally ignorant, in light of all that I knew about this. And so I went about, gathering witnesses to start presenting to them. And John Mack set up a thing called the Project for Extraordinary Experience Research, the peer group there in Cambridge. I became general counsel for them. So I got to interview people, tons of people, who came in, giving details of it. And John started kind of like investigating, say, okay, there you are in the room, you're on the table, they're kind of examining. Look around now, tell me what you see. What do the instruments look like? And he started getting them to describe these little, kind of non-conspicuous aspects of what they were experiencing, so he could see how detailed the information was they knew. And then he would ask other people, and they were giving him almost kind of the same information, the kind of things they were seeing.
Now, were these people that had seen UFOs, or these people
that were in UFOs that had been abducted? These were primarily people who had been abducted. We got way past the people who had seen them.
So what do you make of the abductions? Do you believe that the people you spoke to were legitimately abducted, or do you think it was a phenomena of their consciousness? Or
these people had scars on them where devices had been inserted in them, that we actually had taken out.
And the devices were retrieved.
Oh yeah, they were electronic devices with little wires on them that were running right into their nerve endings. That these are the real deal.
And what happened with these cases and these devices?
They were taken and brought to laboratories and verified and stuff. So we've got a whole panoply of these things. The information's been made available to Congress. That these are that the evidence of the reality of the UFOs is absolutely overwhelming now. There are videos of them. There are photographs that the F-18 Super Hornets pilots have taken right out the window of their airplanes, not just the gun cameras, that can see these things, 4 miles away. They've got UFOs that are right up next to their craft, and they've taken the photographs of them with their own little cameras right out the window. We've got the Jay Stratton, who is the head of the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program in the United States Pentagon, has stated that he has been in the hangar with a verified non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft. And he has seen the beings with his own eyes.
They're alive?
Yeah. They've captured live guys.
And the U.S. government has live non-human entities.
I interviewed a guy by the name of Oscar Wolf, his name was. He was a member of the Project Blue Book, a special team that was investigating the unacknowledged sightings. That there were over 700 of these things that they excluded from Blue Book. That were all in the classified portion of Blue Book that I saw, right? So I got to interview him, and he went into detail about being present for one of these interviews. out at S4.
Were they able to speak with these entities?
It's telepathic. It's all telepathic. Yeah.
And are they in custody, these entities?
Well, it was interesting. Oscar couldn't tell. He went with his commanding officer from Project Blue Book, this special unit of Project Blue Book, out to S4. They went way down underground, and he wasn't even sure how many stories down they went. And they came into this place where they had actual UFO vehicles that were there, hovering, just hovering.
They're functional,
sitting in the air. Yeah, right. They had them there at S4, and they go into this facility where the ET guy was, and he was in this room, like about maybe 20 foot long, and about 20 feet wide, and you could see him through the window, this two-way mirror that they had, it was in the room, and you could look in and see him. They had him in this big blue jumpsuit. They had him all dressed, and he was standing there in the room, and his commander went in and invited Oscar to come in with him. Oscar wouldn't go near him because he thought he was demonic. He said Oscar was from this really fundamentalist Christian congregation, and he thought it was demonic. He didn't want to go near it. And so he could see his commander go into the room. You could see him standing right there, as close as you are to me here. And they were telepathically communicating. And Oscar was sitting there, and they showed him these boxes. They had these boxes of 8.5 by 4 little cards, note cards, and they were from interviews that had been conducted with the ET guy. The personnel were all there that were involved in doing this, and he was reading through them when he was waiting because he didn't want to go in to see the guy. And so he said that they were asking questions, and one of the questions they said, "Well, where are you from? What are you doing here?" And he said that, "Well, I'm part of a group of different beings. They were from different star systems, and we're all involved in this program of going around here inside our galaxy, checking on these different planets where life has evolved. And Earth is one of them. And so that we're just checking up and making reports on how the people are evolving." And the follow-up question was, "Well, who assigned you to this? Who's coordinating this anyhow?" And he said, "Well, it's what you people would call God, but it's a lot different than you think it is." That's what he said. And Oscar would never tell anybody. He told me on his deathbed. He called me in one of those homes where you're dying, hospice home. And he called me from, he was in northern Minnesota, called me at my office, and I flew out to see him. And went in, and he's got all these tubes and things in him, and he's right at death's door. And he said he didn't want to die without telling somebody about this, that he had seen this.
And what was Oscar's role again?
He was a clerk typist for Project Blue Book. That he was in that special unit that was assigned to investigate these 700 or so cases that they could not explain away. They couldn't come up with, they were ball lightning or, spotlights, shining off the bottom of clouds or something. They couldn't come up with any even conceivable explanation because there were just too many witnesses, or they had photos of them, or there were, there are reasons why they couldn't get rid of the case. And so that he would be at the office at this base that they had, and the investigators would go out and interview all the people and come back and give them records, and he would type them all up. And so he ended up staying there for a long time and got to be very close with the commander. And so that's how he got to be invited to come with him to go to S4 for this interview that he was going to do.
And where's S4?
It's in Nevada.
Wow.
It's in Nevada. It's about 11 miles away from Area 51.
And do you know what happened with this extraterrestrial?
I don't.
Or craft?
I don't.
Did Oscar disclose anything else?
No, Oscar didn't know. All he knows is what he knew and what he saw, and that's what he wanted to tell somebody before he died. So he knew that I'd been at Jesuit headquarters, and he was getting set to die, and he needed to tell somebody.
And what was Oscar's clearance? Like, did he have...
He had above top secret clearance because he had access. I mean, this secret is it is the most closely guarded secret in the American intelligence community.
And why was Oscar so certain that this wasn't a foreign government's tech or some type of psyop to?
Because he could see the guy. He could see the UFO guy. He was standing right there.
And what year was this roughly?
It must have been sometime before 1967, because that's when they disbanded Blue Book.
I see.
Yeah.
And is it possible, I always wonder with these things, is it possible this is a misinformation campaign to utilize people to say that they saw things in order to divert attention?
Yeah. I mean, given the depths to which our national security state is willing to go to deceive people and to plant ideas in the minds of the American public and to conceal something, that you can't put anything past them. But when you're doing a professional investigation and stuff like I do, and I've been doing for 50 years, that you lay out what the possibilities are. You start to attribute probability projections to what the alternative explanations are. And in these particular cases, the possibilities of this being fabricated have gone down to almost zero now, in light of all of the data and information that's available. And I've been sitting talking like this to guys with there are 12 levels of security clearances above top secret.
Now, Oscar himself said that he telepathically communicated with this being?
No. His commander was.
I see.
His commander went in and was having this. When he talked to the commander told him that he could telepathically just communicate back and forth with this ET guy.
Now, this crash retrieval that you saw, the photograph, do you know the story about where that came from or what that was?
It was a bad part of my. I was so kind of excited about the fact that I had found it, that what I did is I went, because they had told me I couldn't take any notes and I couldn't take any recordings or anything. So they took my briefcase and stuff away from me, but I had a yellow pad with me. I happened to had a yellow pad under my arm, and I walked in. And so when I saw this, it was in these canisters, these little film microfiche canisters. And so I had this microfiche machine where I would put the microfiche in and I would crank it and see these, all this. So when I was looking for the photos of these things, right? And there they were. And so when I saw them and I saw the symbols along the bottom of the dome, I focused the picture right down to fit the inside cardboard of the yellow pad that I had, and I traced exactly, detailed what every one of these symbols were all the way around the bottom of the dome of this craft. And then I closed up the yellow pad and put it away, and I said, okay, that's it, I'm getting out of here. And I put it all back in and put it all away and just got up and walked out. And I walked out past the guards and picked up my briefcase and started going down the hall, and one of the guards said, Sheehan, what is that you got there? And I said, oh, this is my briefcase. I just picked my briefcase up. And no. He said, what's under your arm there? And so they came over, kind of menaced over me, yanked the thing away from me, and kind of fluttered through all the yellow pages, and there wasn't anything in it. So he handed it back to me like that.
And what were the symbols?
They were, here, you got a pencil? I'll show you.
What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I got to tell you a story. Imagine you're sitting in your house. It's cold outside. It's a little snowy. And you're like, man, I just want a panini. So you go and you order it, from DoorDash or something like that, and it never gets to you. You're looking at the app. You're like, dude, it's been 4 hours. Where's my panini? You're calling. No one answers. Well, this is a true story that happened. There was a woman, a client, that was working as a DoorDash driver, and she slipped and fell on an icy walkway outside of a Panera Bread in Fort Wayne, Indiana. She breaks her elbow, which leads to surgery and hardware having to get inserted into her arm. She can't work. And originally, she sues Panera, and Panera's like, okay, we'll give you like $125,000. But then the good people over at Morgan & Morgan fought for her and got her the $1 million verdict that she deserved. Yes. If you've never heard of them, Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. Yes, and they're that way for a reason. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Now, I'll be honest, if I ordered, a panini and the woman gets paid $1 million because she slipped, it's a tragic thing to happen, of course, but I deserve a little bit of that. I should get a cut at least, right? I'm the one that ordered the panini. If I never ordered that panini, she never would have slipped, never got $1 million, which obviously she deserved, you know what I mean? But maybe next time, She gets $1 million, $1.1 million. I can get a cool 100,000 out of that. Regardless, all I'm saying is if you're ever injured and you are looking to get the money that you deserved, the compensation that is entitled to you from your injuries, Morgan & Morgan could be the way to go. Hiring the wrong law firm can be disastrous. I mean, you can be locked up in litigation. It's a nightmare. But hiring the right law firm could substantially increase your settlement. And with Morgan & Morgan, it's easy to get started. Their fee is $0 unless they win. That's right. Their fee is free unless they win your case. You don't pay you pay 0 cents unless they win your case. You can visit forthepeople.com/gagnon, Gagnon. That is forthepeople.com/gagnon, or dial #law. That's #529 from your cell phone. That's forthepeople.com/gagnon, or click the link in the description below. And thank you so much to the good folks over at Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this program and making this show possible with this paid advertisement. Well, let's get back to the show.
Okay, here we go. So here's the I'll do it right side up here. Here's the field right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see there's this big gouge right through the field where in the dirt is all kicked up all around it like that because there's snow all over the place, right?
As if like a plane crashed or something.
Well, but it was interesting. It just plowed this big gouge through the field. You could see it, and there was this hill, this big embankment here, and the craft itself was stuck into the side of the embankment, sort of like this. It kind of skidded along here and then stuck into the snowbank like that. But it was dirt. You could tell it was an earthen bank there like that. And it had this dome on it like this. Had this dome on the top, right? And around the bottom of the dome here, you could see like and there were these guys around. There was a guy here and a guy here, and there was a guy over on this side. These two guys had cameras taking photographs of it. They were all dressed in like winter garb, Air Force garb, with a little furry around the hoods. And then this guy is the guy that had the thing with the two little canisters, the movie canisters, taking a movie of this thing. And around the bottom, right along here, right along the bottom of the dome, there was this stuff. You could see it, and it was like this, and it went all around the bottom of the dome like that, and it was just a whole bunch of variations on that kind of slant, whatever, to slash with these little things all around the sides, these little dots and dashes and little horseshoe shaped guys, and so I just copied them all down just like that, and then said, "Okay, that's it."
And are these images that you're showing me, is this exactly what there was, or is this more or less what it looked
like?
Well,
no, this is it's not the right order. You see, I don't. I brought it back to Jesuit headquarters that what I had, but they looked like this. And what I did is we put them into the files we had at the Jesuit headquarters. We took the files with us out to California when we did the Iran-Contra case, against the Enterprise and all that. And at the end, George Bush Sr. pardoned all the main guys that we had gotten indicted. We got them indicted by the special prosecutor, Lawrence Walsh. And then he pardoned them all. And then the judge in the case down in Florida, it was in the Southern District of Florida in Miami, that we filed the federal criminal racketeering complaint against them, right? Because that's where they were shipping a lot of things out from the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood Airport, so that we'd have venue over them. And the judge, it turns out, was appointed by Richard Nixon at the recommendation of B.B. Rebozo, who is a major mob bank owner, along with Meyer Lansky. They owned the Miami National Bank down there. That was where the skim from the casinos was kept and all that.
Right.
Anyway, and so the Judge James Lawrence King entered an order excluding 4 different eyewitnesses it was a bombing. It was all about a bombing. But we identified the entire enterprise. We identified who the people were that were in it, and what the aircrafts were, what the weapons were that they were smuggling, and all that. We had them.
And you brought this with you?
Yeah, well, no, that in that case, that we had the headquarters up in Washington, D.C., but we were doing the case down in Florida. But what happened is when George Bush pardoned all of the defendants that we had filed the civil case against, the judge entered an order summarily dismissing the civil case, saying that since no one had been ultimately criminally convicted,
what are we doing?
Because they were pardoned,
right?
That we must have been filing this for political purposes. And we were a 501c3 tax-exempt foundation, and therefore we'd violated our 501c3 tax-exempt charter that you couldn't engage in political activity because Bush was running for the presidency. So at the time we filed the complaint when he was vice president, he later became a candidate for the presidency, and so what they did is Bush when he got elected, directed the Internal Revenue Service guy to revoke our 501c3 tax-exempt charter, and so the judge summarily dismissed our case.
Wow, I mean that seems.
And then the Tom Spencer, who was the lawyer for Jack Singlaub. Jack Singlaub was the president of the World Anti-Communist League, the former NATO commander, U.S. military commander in South Korea. Anyway, his lawyer Tom Spencer filed a motion with Judge King, asking to impound all of our documents. So at our headquarters, so they could find out who the sources were that had provided this information to us. And so what we did is we packed up all of the files in a big 18-wheel tractor trailer and took them to California, to Jackson Brown's ranch.
In those files,
that was here. And what we did is we put the files in a storage facility where they couldn't find them. And what happened is it had one of the big super rainstorms in California that wiped out this part of this storage facility, and they unilaterally threw out a shitload of the different things that had gotten wet. And we got all of our files eventually up out of there, but these were gone, and so were a whole bunch of other ones that the people there just threw out. So it's one of those things that kind of goes a glimmering into history, but that we got a look at it. So I just don't know what the order of all those symbols was.
I see. So now, how does this work, right? Like, United States is not maybe in that time, even in that time, wasn't the only polar superpower in the in the world. If a aircraft from a different star system crash lands or is captured on our soil, aren't other governments able to see what enters into, this, cosmic airspace? Are they not able to detect what's entering in? Do other countries not have crash retrievals like this?
Well, it's varied. I mean, the levels of surveillance capacity have evolved over time, both with us and with Russia and China. And there's no doubt at all that Russia has at least one of these craft. We have 9 of them. That Russia's got one, China has got one.
At least 9 or 9?
We know that we've got 9. That I don't know how many more we might have, but I know that we've verified that we've got 9 of them. And I've talked to the guys who know where they are, right? And we've been trying to get some members of Congress to go to the place and see them, but they won't do it because they don't have the adequate clearance to go do it. And then when they try to apply for the clearance, they won't give them the clearance. And the Congress is just sitting there going, oh, well, we don't have the clearance to get to go see these things, so we don't know whether they exist or whether they do or not.
Now, would a country like India, with their,
they're on the brink of doing this kind of stuff now. We don't know. We don't have any verification. We've got verification that both Russia and China have at least one.
And why don't they disclose?
I assume that they may be doing the same thing that we're doing, which is trying to reverse engineer the technology so that it can generate an entire new weapon system. That our people are trying to master the propulsion system so that they can transport a nuclear payload from launch in the U.S. into the heart of Russia or China, within 2 minutes. To have a first strike weapon.
And so no other country would say, oh, we have things coming into the Earth, like other, I guess like, space programs in different countries that would say, hey, there's things entering into our solar system or into our
they've said
atmosphere.
it. Brazil has said it. France has said it. There are several countries that have been very explicit about the fact that they've got files on all of these different landings and things like that.
Could you point me to one of those?
Brazil, I think, is there's a big report. You just Google the Brazilian report on UFOs. It's an official Brazilian Air Force account.
Because I know they had the Virginia incident that happened in Brazil.
That's a specific incident. But they've got Brazil has done a report. The Virginia thing is the thing that James Fox did the documentary about and all that. But they did it earlier about in France has done it too. France has released it.
Where basically the government is saying there's things entering into the Earth's atmosphere that are not asteroids.
They're not ours, and they're not asteroids. They're some kind of craft that we've spotted them. They don't profess to have one in custody. That's what kind of set off the program that the U.S. has, is that we've now got David Grush and others testifying that we've got them physically in custody. And we've got 40 witnesses now that have actually gone before the Senate Intelligence Committee under oath and had depositions taken under oath, giving details of their own personal involvement. In many of them, of the 40, some of them have secondhand information that had directed them toward the other witnesses. But they've got people directly that were involved in the back engineering program that have testified now.
And do you think we've successfully reverse engineered these craft?
That we can mimic some of their functions now. That we've been able to construct craft that look virtually like, except the problem is ours have got like bolts in them, in soldering, and theirs don't. Their crafts are all one piece. That's one of the ways you can tell. If you can get up close to one of these man-made objects, you can see that they've got rivets in them and stuff like that. That's how you can tell. But they can hover. You can see that they've gotten a grip on some of the kind of anti-gravity aspects of them. And some people suspect that they've gone even farther, to the point of having some at least localized propulsion operation, where they can kind of go like, they can shoot. Well, they've monitored them coming from 80,000 feet, which is technically outer space, down to the surface of the ocean in 0.7 of 1 second for over 80,000 feet. And they stop dead like that instantaneously, generating what they estimate to be 6,000 Gs, which would totally disintegrate any kind of material craft that we know of. And then they plunge under the ocean, like with no splash, under the ocean, and travel at over 200 miles an hour.
And where does that report come from?
From the Nimitz. The Nimitz was on station down off Baja. There's a base, they believe, down there that they've radared, at least 100 different times, a UFO craft coming right to that very exact longitude and latitude and plunging into the ocean right there. And then they've had submarines that monitor them.
Now, it seems like these craft violate the laws of nature, that they are able to operate outside of what we understand, craft operate.
They obviously don't violate the laws of nature. They appear to violate the rules as we presently understand them, but they're obviously it's scientific. I mean, there's some kind of there's some dimensions to all of this that we haven't quite figured out yet. That they can do things. That not only the speed, but they've got this this cloaking device that they do. They kind of materialize, and dematerialize. They can do that, and it's not just apparently masking them, but that they actually materialize. And it appears to be having more to do with how they transport. how they go from point A to B. that it may not be a linear process, no matter how fast it is, how fast beyond the speed of light they go. But it appears to be moving from point A to point B, like almost like astral travel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they compare it to.
Is it strange to you that they crash?
Well, it's interesting that the original recovery that went on at Roswell appears to was some kind of a function of either, because it was near the 509th Bomber Group. It was the only place on the planet that had nuclear weapons. It's the place from which the Enola Gay was launched.
Oh, wow.
They dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So it was the only place where atomic bombs existed on the planet, right there. And it was surrounded by a massive amount of radar around that place to protect it. And it appears that they either ran into that kind of heavy radar system, but there was a huge electrical storm that night and lightning everywhere. And it's possible that it got hit by lightning. But that when they refer to the crashes, they may not be crashes at all. I mean, the later ones, because they were working like mad to develop some sort of a technology by means of which they could interrupt their navigation capacity, and we've been working on it. And there's some kind of an electromagnetic field that we're able to project that forces them down to land. In fact, there's in fact, the people that we were talking to that were talking about being involved in deploying this thing, one of the problems is that when you deploy this field that can neutralize their navigation capacity, it just keeps on going, and it'll knock down commercial planes if you do it.
In what way? How does it work?
It apparently like blows out all of their electrical circuits. It's sort of like a pulse weapon. Just like you can knock out a small plane. They've got a weapon, a pulse weapon, that you can aim at a small Piper Cub or a Beechcraft and zap it, and it'll fry all the wiring in the whole plane, and it'll just go in. In this they've got some really super powerful mechanism of some sort that can deploy a field like that. But it has, in fact, according to one of the sources that we have on it, is that it actually has, on more than one occasion, has knocked down a private plane that they hadn't kind of taken into account, because it kept on going. The effect kept on going, knocked the plane down, and they've had to go recover that craft and figure out how to handle the disappearance of that craft.
Wow. So this was just a regular citizen on a private plane.
Just a private plane. Yeah.
Was that private plane crash, was that politicized, or was it a news story, or was it just a random person on a plane?
No, it wasn't anything. It was an effort to bring down a UFO,
right?
A targeted UFO, but the scatter from the event knocked that other plane down.
And this has been, I mean, people talk about this happening around the time of the invention of the nuclear weapon, the Manhattan Project, that many of these craft start to all of a sudden appear.
The first one that we have a specific record of, it was with then Captain Philip Corso, 1945, in early June of 1945, that he was a range officer at White Sands, Yucca Flats, Alamogordo, and they had this whole place because they were getting set to test the Trinity site. They were going to try to explode the first atomic bomb to show that it could be done. So they had all this radar, intense radar up everywhere. A lot of guys have suffered consequences of being exposed to all that. And he said, but he got ready to take a lunch break. And he got one of the Jeeps and had his lunch packed, and he drove away from the site and drove up the little foothills, and he drove into this little kind of valley, and here was a UFO sitting right there. And he was freaking out over it, because the first time they'd ever seen one. This is 1945. This is before Don Keyhole or any of those
Benny
things,
and Barney Hill. Right?
Yeah, way before. And so, but he saw it there, and he walked over toward it, and one of the beings came out, almost 6 feet tall, 5.5 feet tall, arms, legs, big round head, thing, and telepathically communicated to him, he said. Said, look, at our plane, our craft, something has gone wrong with our craft. We think it has something to do with what you got going on here electronically. Could you please turn this off? Could you please turn this off and just let us leave? Corso said he actually did do it. He said it was just one of those moments that he was kind of transported to this other kind of place, and he went and called up and ordered them to turn it off for 5 minutes, and several of them saw this thing just fly out of there like that. And now the reason that I credit this is because the way I found out about it is that Corso, before he died, did an 8.5 millimeter, little home movie for his grandchildren, that he just, right at the camera, just told them about this event that he experienced back in 1945.
Did you see the video?
Yeah. Yeah, it was an 8 millimeter movie, home movie. It wasn't even a video. It was pre-video.
Does it exist publicly?
Yeah, well, it doesn't exist publicly, but it exists. It exists.
And how did you see it?
That George Knapp showed it to me.
That is bizarre. And I'm curious, with something like this, I mean, around 45 is like one of these first credible sightings. It must have been going on for time before that these beings were coming to Earth.
Well, I don't doubt that. I mean, I haven't gotten into all the ancient astronaut stuff. I know that it's on television all the time, and they're into attributing the pyramids to them and all that. I haven't. The concrete studies that I've done about it. The reason I know about the Corso's thing is because George showed it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that I've met Paola Harris, who is very, very close to Corso. I've seen the notebooks that he had. That he actually wrote another book that was published in Italy, all in Italian, where he talked about that. So I've confirmed it in his notes, and it goes with the 8 millimeter film that I had seen earlier. So I credit that. And then, of course, in the book that he wrote called The Day After Roswell, that he ascended to become, he was a captain back in 1945. He became a full colonel, and he was in charge of the United States Pentagon foreign technology acquisition department. So that it was his job, if they recovered any aircraft or any other foreign technology, it was his job to figure out what it was and how to develop it or use it. And he said that he was given the technology from the Roswell crash. He was got a full bird colonel in the United States Army that's in charge of the thing, writing a book saying that that's what he was in charge of. And so that, so why would he do that? I mean, that's not a career builder. But because he had told his grandchildren in that 8 millimeter film, you could tell that he felt compelled, as he got older and older, to make sure that there was a record of what he had seen.
Wow.
So he told about that. They got not only the silicon chip out of that crash.
Which silicon chip?
The silicon chip that they've used to develop all the computers and stuff came out of the 1945 Roswell crash. That's what Corso says.
And do you think there's credibility to that idea?
I find it hard to believe why the United States colonel in commanding the U.S. Pentagon or office would make that up. It also had Kevlar. They just started the Kevlar. It also had the optics. What do they call those?
Like fiber optics?
Fiber optics. The fiber optics were in that. And his job was to get this technology and filter it into certain private corporations to get them to develop it. And he says so. You can get it. It's called The Day After Roswell. It's the book he wrote about it.
Wow. The day after Roswell.
Yeah, and he says so, and also the night vision stuff. You see all of our troops and stuff running around in Afghanistan and stuff, and they flip down the kind of binoculars that they flip down and can run around in the night. Said that the night vision stuff technology can, the day after Roswell. There it is.
I've never heard of this. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So how does this work on a broad scale? That you have this craft that is either forced to descend or crashes. Someone calls in and says, "Hey, there's been a crash of some kind."
There were special units.
There's a special unit that handles this.
The blue unit. They had a unit. I talked to one of the guys that was in the unit, and interviewed him. Clifford Stone, his name was. Sergeant Clifford Stone.
And how do they know where the crash is going to be, and how do they get people there immediately?
They have different units at different bases in different regions of the country, and that they fly them in. They have almost like scramble jets, and they scramble them and they fly right to the site, and then they start ordering in the local. They have the authority to order in local equipment from the nearest military bases. They roll them on in, cordon off the whole area, and declare it usually to be a biohazard. That's their favorite.
So local police are involved.
Well, they can get local police enforcing the perimeters.
Right.
They can say, look, we got a biohazard here. We need you to block off Highway 2 and 6, and don't let any cars through here, direct traffic out around here. That there's a temporary period where we're going to be shut down. And then they bring in the big, heavy equipment to try to load these things up.
And they put them on trucks, presumably?
They're great, big, gigantic trucks that they've got that they carry them on. I mean, the ones that they've recovered are basically 30, 40 feet wide, most of these little craft. I mean, the big ones now, they haven't recovered any of those. They've got videotape of one of these things that's bigger than 2 football fields.
Videotape?
Yeah. Yeah, just sliding right over the top of, what's the place in Texas? Stevensville.
I've heard of these types of crafts, these massive sort of like football field type things that moves pretty slowly.
The big lights. There's 3. It's a big triangle shaped thing.
Nick Pope spoke to me about one of these.
Yeah, Stevensville.
Do they have footage of this that's publicly available?
Yeah. There's footage. There's footage of the Stevensville thing.
Stevensville,
yeah,
Texas.
It's like the one in Phoenix. The Phoenix Lights, there are dozens and dozens of people that testify about having the Phoenix Lights one go right over them, right over the house, and how it blocked out the entire stars above. And it's got a big bulb on top and one on the bottom. And then there's these 3 lights, each one at the corners of the triangular vehicle. And, these are the size of a football field, and that they can, the term that they use is they move like sparks off a grinder. And that they're the size of a football field.
And they can enter into our atmosphere, and it's not globally detected. Our government must be aware that these things
no, we can show that they've got a thing called Golden Dome, not the one that Trump's talking about. There's a thing, the code name is Golden Dome, and that they can actually track them. They can pick them up pretty quickly when they start coming in, and they can even see them when they're veiled.
So then these blue teams come in, and then they move these to an undisclosed site, whatever the nearest military base is.
Usually the military base. So they've got 2 of them at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There's apparently one in a base in Missouri. They've got one. There's one outside of Maryland right now that we know where that one is. So that they've got them. And that they've had an awful hard time at the very beginning. I'm talking about in the 1950s and stuff, if they ever got one of they couldn't figure out how to get into them. If they found a completely intact craft, they couldn't figure out how to get into it. It didn't have any kind of apertures anywhere, and it took them a long time to figure out how to get into them. And they didn't know how to fly. When they finally got into them, there weren't any controls, so that there wasn't any control board or anything in them. And then they finally realized that they were navigated by telepathy, the craft itself. in that the craft, the wiring inside the craft is not only the fiber optics, which are flow right into the metal. They're not like soldered in or anything. The fiber optics flow right into the metal of the craft, and they've got the wiring is actually stem cells, like ET biological stem cells that have generated dendrites and synapses, like in your brain, are inside the craft, so that the craft are semi-sentient, and they direct the craft through telepathy.
And where do these reports come from? Is this people that have spoken to, or are these disclosed?
No, it's not disclosed. These are people that have done the back engineering on them, that are telling Congress about it.
And you spoke with these people?
I have.
Under what context?
In the context of people trying to persuade them to come forward publicly, and them saying that, you got to get me protection, because I don't have adequate protection. I'll get retaliated against if I go public with this. But they're willing to tell the staff and members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And a lot of them haven't even been willing to talk to the House Oversight Committee, because they view the House members as less kind of reliable.
What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because you need help pitching your tents. Yes, and that's what we do over here at camp. Maybe you're, in line waiting for a concert somewhere and you just need something to lean on. Who knows? Maybe you just need help pleasing the special man or woman in your life. And that's why I want to talk to you guys about Blue Chew. Blue Chew is the ultimate service to get you discreet supplements right to your home. And what do these supplements do? They give you that leg, that third leg, the important one. And Blue Chew is going to help you lay it down, okay? It's an amazing service that's coming straight to your door. And for the listeners of this very program, they are going to get their first month of Blue Chew for free. All you need to use is the promo code GAGNON, GAGNON, and you'll have them gagging. You know what I'm talking about? I'm saying, my boy. So go to bluechew.com and try the promo code GAGNON, GAGNON, and you're going to get your first month free. All you got to do is pay $5 for shipping. That's like a coffee, okay? So to skip your morning cold brew and instead get that hard brew for an entire month. Yes, that is at bluechew.com. Use the promo code GAGNON and start laying it down like they deserve. Let's get back to the show. These types of sensitive issues, right? These types of, crash retrievals and like deeply classified, operations that the government are doing. Who has access? If Congress can't, investigate it, who can?
They have different categories of clearance. As I say, there's at least a dozen clearance levels above top secret. There are hundreds of people that have got top secret clearances that are all through the intelligence agencies and military services. But you start getting into these kind of programs, and you start rising into these higher classifications, and then they have these programs. The ones that are kind of the equivalent of top secret are like what they call special access programs. They call them. Then there are unacknowledged special access programs. Then there are exempt, unacknowledged special access programs. And then there are black, unacknowledged, exempted special access programs. And each of these kind of correlates to a higher and higher level of clearance. And then there is a close to the top level of clearance, where in order to get the clearance, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that authorizes your immediate execution if you violate it, that you can be gunned down on the street anywhere at any time.
And that's confirmed, or this has been speculated?
That's confirmed.
Really?
Yeah, it hasn't been acknowledged. It hasn't been acknowledged, but I know that to be true because I know people that have signed them.
And inside of these documents, they say you will not disclose what you know, and if you do, you will be summarily executed.
You agree to, you waive any kind of claim of your relatives or family or anybody for any kind of cause of action that you were consenting to being gunned down at a moment's notice on the street anywhere if you do that. And what it is an extension of the authorization of the use of lethal force. If you go to Area 51 or one of these other highly classified areas, you'll see these great big huge signs, lethal force authorized, so that if you step onto that property, you can be shot and killed.
With no recourse.
With no recourse. And
so
they've just extended that to believing that they're authorized to use that lethal force to protect those secrets that are normally in that physical area, even though they're not in the physical area. That you know about it, you can't reveal them.
So does the president have access to this information?
Not always, no. That's a question of discretion as to whether they're provided the access. I'm sure that Clinton wasn't. I know he wasn't, because and Obama wasn't briefed in on it. Biden was not briefed in on it. Apparently, Bush Sr. was briefed in on it. It appears that Dick Cheney was briefed in on it. But not the president.
Was Trump briefed in, to your knowledge?
He's been briefed about the fact that we're in possession of non-human origin spacecraft. And he's been briefed in on the fact that we're in possession of the bodies of some of the occupants that have been tested and that they're non-human. He's been briefed in on that.
And how do you know that he's been briefed in on that?
Because I talked to the people that briefed him.
And they came from these specialized operations. Now, why would they share this with you if they could be executed?
Because I'm the one that's drafting the statutes to protect them. So we have to know the kind of things that they're afraid of in order to get them covered. Because if you don't cover them, they're assuming that it's waived, and that it's not covered. So that we have to be able to specify the kind of threats that they're exposed to, and have Congress explicitly prohibit them. And we have to have the authority to take depositions, involuntary depositions from people that are in possession of this information, compelling them to do it, and have the power of contempt against them if they don't cough the information up, so that they can be subjected to imprisonment for refusing to answer. And I mean, so you have to have lawyers that know enough to track them into their den, on this stuff.
So who are these people or sections of the United States government that are operating without this presidential oversight, and how does that work?
Oh, there are extraordinary levels of activity in the Pentagon that are functioning without congressional oversight. I mean, it's like it's a constitutional disgrace that, for example, when back in 1991, because we've been so deeply involved in the Iran-Contra thing, and we knew what they were doing and lying and carrying on, and we were asked at the Christic Institute by Senator Barbara Boxer from California to draft a statute which would prohibit the president and the Secretary of Defense and the head of the Central Intelligence Agency and others from engaging in covert operations that entailed action that would be considered an act of war against any foreign power without the prior written express authorization of Congress. Right. That's the Boxer Amendment that we did. And what happened is, once it got into the House and Senate intelligence committees and that were set up after the Church Committee hearings and the Armed Services Committee hearings, they amended the statute to say that the president was authorized to engage in covert operations, even if they entailed actions that might be considered an act of war, but that he had to report these to the Congress, to the Senate and House Intelligence Committee and Armed Services Committee chairs within 60 days of their commencement. And if after that, if the Congress had, within an additional 60 days following their notice, had not provided written authorization for that to continue, they had to stop.
I see.
And so you say to yourself, how'd that work out for us?
Yeah.
You know, what kind of a real imprimatur did we impose upon the president? Well, what really happened is it transmuted it into the first delegation of explicit authority from Congress, waiving their Article 1 power to declare war, delegating it to the president under certain circumstances.
I mean, isn't that kind of what caused the Iran-Contra affair initially, that we wanted to arm the Contras, but because of this, there was a statute that was put in place that we couldn't do that?
Yeah.
So we had to find a loophole.
The Bolin Amendment. Well, we didn't have to find it. I mean, that's not constitutional. That's like saying I had to find my way into the bank so I could rob it.
Fair.
You know, because they had a locked door on the thing. I mean, what do they think they're doing here?
Putting myself in Reagan's position.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Well, we had to do something to fund these Contras.
Well, they didn't have to do it. You know, but the bottom line is they wanted to.
Right.
You know, and that's the reason Congress passed the statute. Because they knew they wanted to do it. You know, they knew that they had been supporting Somoza, and Somoza had been disappearing thousands of people, torturing them, killing them, assassinating them, you know, and had death squads that were trained by the Central Intelligence Agency at a place called the School of the Americas. We knew right exactly where it was.
I see.
You know, and then you have to just pound them into the floor to give all the information to the Congress. And once the Congress knows that you know, and they know that you're telling the public that you know, then they think they have to do something about it.
Right.
And so that the good guys try to draft up a statute to do something about it, and the other people inside, primarily in the Intelligence Committee and in the Armed Services Committee, transform that statute into authorizing them to do it.
But now, in this case, the president still is the one that's sort of moving the ball forward. I'm curious.
No, he wasn't in that case. The fact is that it was being run by Poindexter. Poindexter was his national security advisor, and John Poindexter testified that he never told the president because he knew the president would agree, but he wanted to protect him so that he could deny any particular knowledge about it.
I see.
And that's how they did it.
So do you believe with the UFO issue, these sites like S4, that this is a similar kind of thing that goes on?
No, I mean, the presidents know about S4 and they know about Area 51, but they believe, the ones that are not briefed in on this, they believe that it's like, you know, developing the SR-71, you know, the Blackbird and supersonic planes, the F-22, you know, that they're cutting edge kind of traditional weaponry that are being developed, particularly aircraft. You know, I mean, we've got aircraft that go like Mach 15. You know, I mean, really weird aircraft. I mean, they look like one of these terrible cyber trucks that Elon Musk designed. You know, those terrible looking things. You know, we got jets that look like that. You know, and they go Mach 15.
Wow, these aren't like what kind of jets are these? These are disclosed, or they're still technically classified?
I've seen them. Okay. I don't know how many other people have seen them.
These aren't like the black sort of stealth bomber type.
No. Those are SR-71. Those are the big Blackbirds and stuff like that. People have gotten they fly them over football games now. Right. You know, but the other ones they don't. But you know, so there's all that whole world of stuff going on, and a lot of those the presidents will say, well, you know, I don't need to know, you know, what the latest, you know, version of our fighter jets are. You know, so it's okay if you don't brief me on that. I trust you. You go ahead and do what you're going to do. But what these are things that are specifically concealed from the president because they view the presidents as part-time employees.
Right. So this is kind of the deep state that people talk about.
That's right.
Permanent government.
This is the deep state.
And who controls this permanent government?
Well, in this particular case, there appears to have been a committee that was set up by President Truman. Back in the end of July of 1947, after the recovery of the Roswell craft. And once they realized what they had here, he designated this group, and he selected a group of 12 guys. Some were inside the government, some were from inside major corporations, et cetera. Some were other big, wealthy bankers that were influential in the political realm, and assigned them the responsibility of keeping this secret.
And what was the name of this committee?
They called it MJ12, the Majestic group, they called it. Now, there's lots of debates going on about these papers that have been discovered that were provided to Bob Wood and his son. But the fact is that people have seized upon one or two particular pages that have been salted into these things that have things in them that were fabricated. And so that they say, see, there's something that's not true. So therefore, all of these documents are completely untrue. But they've found numerous documents that make reference to this MJ-12, or the Magic Group, they called them. And what happens is that those 12 people, each of them was to hand pick who his successor was to be. As he got to the point of getting ready to die or retire or go away, they would handpick their successor. So it's come down through the years as to who is in it now, and we don't know right now who is in there now. And so that's part of what we're trying to find out is who are they? Because what kind of authority do they claim? Are they asserting that because Truman appointed somebody back in July of 1947, that those guys had the authority to appoint another one who had the authority to appoint you? And then the present presidents don't know anything about it at all?
And they're receiving money from the defense budget.
Well, what they're doing is they're embezzling money from the defense budget. What they're doing is they're having Congress appropriate billions of dollars for certain programs, and then they're embezzling it. And they're directing it off into these programs to do these super secret programs, and it's all being covered by paperwork pretending it's doing something else.
And what disclosure is there on that topic of kind of these black sites pulling off these?
They're involved. There's a major investigation going on right now to track all of that.
And this is an investigation that you're a part of?
I'm not at liberty to talk about that.
That's fair. So I'm curious, as far as how these things stay covert, because you have these 12 people maybe, and maybe it's expanded. It's not really difficult. It's difficult to really understand how these infrastructures work. Mm-hmm. Who would know about them? It seems like Congress doesn't really have the access. The president may or may not if he's interested, but he's probably being briefed by his, immediate staff to say hey, we're developing weapons. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Who would have some connection? They must have employees, or they must have cleaners. They must have some level of, interconnection with these other agencies. What does that look like?
Those are the right questions, but that for example, in congressional hearings that I was in by the House Oversight Committee, members of Congress would say to, for example, Lou Elizondo, who's my client, would say, who is it that ordered you not to tell us this? I'm not at liberty to disclose who that is, and when you're not able to tell us who it is, how can somebody be telling you can't tell Congress? And you're not going to tell us who it is, And so unless Congress is willing to hold him in contempt, for which he'd be perfectly willing just to go to jail rather than get shot,
right?
And so the national security state has set up a series of boundaries around themselves and protections around themselves to continue to function secretly. And they've not only embezzled this money, they have access to literally trillions of dollars, in gold and stuff that they've illegally shipped out of the Philippines that were recovered in troves that the Japanese buried in the Philippines toward the end of World War II. That they recovered 12 of these different tranches of gold, each one of which was worth over $100 billion at the time. That's gold at $32 an ounce, which is now like $1,400 an ounce. But they've got 12 of those troves.
What is that story?
Well, that's an interesting story.
What was the name of that operation to find this gold?
It was called Operation Golden Lily. That there was a unit of the Japanese military prior to World War II, going on from about 1932 all the way to 1943. For like 10 years. And there was a unit under General Yakushima that was assigned to go all throughout Southeast Asia, robbing banks, taking their gold, taking golden Buddhas out of the monasteries, stealing people's diamonds and rubies and stuff, taking every single piece of gold, silver, platinum, and precious jewels. and that they had these big 50-gallon drums of diamonds and rubies and sapphires, et cetera, and that they had them in the Japanese islands as a war chest for their war that they were getting ready to wage to keep the Western powers out of the Pacific. That was their region. The Pacific was to be governed by them, by the Japanese Empire. And what happened is after the Battle of Midway in May of 1942, where our Sixth Fleet basically destroyed the Japanese Navy. So they were helpless, and so we could project power into the Pacific through our aircraft carriers. And when the Germans surrendered, the Fifth Army of Germany surrendered in May of 1943 in front of the gates of Stalingrad, because they had frozen during the winter there, that we knew that we were going to win. We crushed the Japanese Navy. We destroyed the German Fifth Army. So it was just a matter of time. And then the Germans surrendered in May of 1945 in Germany. Japanese were still at war, and what they were doing is they decided they had to immediately shift all this gold and silver out of Japan, to get out of Japan, because they were expecting a land invasion by the Western powers. And so what they were doing is they were secretly shipping it out and burying it in various troves in the Philippine Islands, 176 troves,
Wow.
each one having $100 billion in gold, bullion, in platinum, and silver, and these big 50-gallon drums of precious jewels.
And this was recovered by the United States?
No, they got 12 of them. They got 12 of them, but there's 176 of them. And they got 12 of them. That Ed Lansdale, who was the G2, U.S. Army G2 in Manila, knew about the fact that they had done this, and he knew that General Yakushima is the one that had buried them, because he's the one that had been gathering them all together in this Golden Lily battalion that he had. So he was the one assigned to bury them in the Philippine Islands. And what they did is they kept maps of where they buried them. And the Emperor Hirohito sent his nephew, who was a Japanese prince, with General Yakushima, so he'd know where they were. And so he would have the maps of where they were all buried, so that the emperor would know where the treasure was. Well, it turns out that nephew of Hiroshima, who was Emperor Hirohito.
Hirohito, right.
That prince was gay, and he had a gay valet, who was a young 18-year-old Filipino guy who was his driver. And he would drive the prince around, and so that Ed Lansdale was smart enough to realize at the end of the war that he couldn't get a hold of General Yakushima. So what he did is he kidnapped his driver. And they found out about this prince that had these maps, and they found out that he had this gay valet, and they started searching for him, but that they ended up finding through the driver of Yakushima, his physical driver. They tortured him. That Ed Lansdale had him tortured by this guy by the name of Santa Marino. His name was a sergeant who tortured him until he coughed it up, and they found 12 of these. And they when they punched the first one and found the $100 billion, or that I've seen photos of it. It's like the length of, it's like the size of a football stadium, and you can see gold bullion shoulder high stacked as far as you can see, and that Ed Lansdale flew from Manila to Singapore to see General Douglas MacArthur, who was the commander of the Pacific forces at the time. And this is in December of 1945, right? And he started briefing General MacArthur about it. MacArthur said, "Hold it, I'm going to bring in my G2." He brings in, his name Charles Willoughby, his name was Charles Willoughby, who was his G2, right? It comes in, and so Ed Lansdale briefs him on the whole thing. MacArthur says, okay, I'm going to have Willoughby and you fly in my private plane back to Manila, back to Hawaii, back into the States, and go see the president. And you're going to tell President Truman that we have found these 12 troves of gold and silver and platinum and jewels. So he flew him back, and they come back into Washington and started trying to get a meeting with Truman, and his chief of staff wouldn't let them see him unless they briefed the chief of staff as to what it was about. And so they briefed him on it, and that was Clark Clifford. These are names like boomers would like jump out of their seat when they, what? Clark Clifford. Yeah, well, that's Clark Clifford. That's who he was. And went on to become the head of the United States Treasury Department.
Wow.
So he came in, and they started briefing President Truman about this. And Truman said, hold it. I need to bring in Stimson. And he brings in Stimson, who was the Secretary of War, brings him into the meeting. Stimson brings in his 3 deputies, Robert Lovett, Robert B. Anderson, and John J. McCloy. He brings them into the meeting. They brief them about what they've got, and Truman says, we're not telling anybody about this. We're going to set up a private trust and put these 12 troves of gold in. We're going to fly it out with U.S. military craft. We're going to put them in the bank, the International Bank of Credit in Geneva, Switzerland. And we're going to write gold certificates on it and use the gold certificates as bearer bonds. And we can finance the campaigns of former Nazis, actually, all through Europe, so that we can keep the partisans from being elected into these offices in Europe, because we cannot allow the reins of government of any country in Europe to fall into the control of the socialists or communists, even if it is the will of the majority of their own people. That's the Truman Doctrine, 1948, taught by Henry Kissinger in Gov 182 at Harvard College. That's a fact. All right. And so that's what they did. So they moved all that gold to the bank, and they've had that access to those covert funds, which they've been using, to fund covert operations all around the world. Then they had the Congress pass. It was at the behest of Robert Lovett, who was one of the trustees. They made them the trustees. Robert Lovett, Robert B. Anderson, and John J. McCloy were made the trustees of this private trust called the Anderson Trust. Okay, and that they are the ones that manage that money. Robert Lovett and John Robert Anderson are both senior partners in Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers Harriman was a huge private investment group based in New York that was made up of almost all the robber baron families that were private investors in Brown Brothers Harriman in the investment group. The CEO of that group was George Herbert Walker. Okay, the grandfather of George Herbert Walker Bush. His son-in-law was Prescott Bush, okay? And the legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman was Allen Dulles, who was made the first civilian head of the Central Intelligence Agency. And it was Robert Lovett that wrote the memo to Truman suggesting they create the Central Intelligence Agency, who could engage in covert operations to do all these things that they wanted to do, to basically crush any kind of socialist movements in Europe.
And it was funded by these troves.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened to the other 64 sites?
100. 176 troves there
but that's how many there were. We recovered 12.
That's right.
What happened to the others?
Marcos recovered 2 of them later. Ferdinando Marcos, he got 2 of them. And
he's a Filipino guy?
He was a Philippine president. And one of them was discovered by Senator Pimentel, who was the majority leader, president of the Senate of the Philippines. He and a member, Mr. Ayala, who was the 3rd richest man in the Philippines, they punched one of the sites. They found it and got $100 billion.
Are all the sites accounted for?
No, none of them.
So where are they?
In the Philippines.
And why is this not a massive war that's being undertaken to extract them?
There's been all kinds of stuff going on behind closed doors to try to find them, Lots of folks.
That is crazy. Does that contribute to the current state of Filipino politics as we know it today?
Not really, no. That Pimentel just stole it. He stole the one thing that they found. He and Mr. I had conversation. I sat and talked to him just like this at his desk in the Senate in the Philippines. That he wanted me as legal counsel for the Jesuit headquarters in the social ministry office to get permission from Cardinal Sin. That was his name. Sighn. Cardinal Sin was the primate of the Catholic Church in the Philippines, and wanted me to get Cardinal Sin to sign a letter blessing him and Mr. Aya to be able to take the $100 billion trove and lift it out of the Philippines and keep it for themselves. He offered to give us $10 billion if we would agree to do that.
And
give us 10% of the trove, and I said no, we're not going to do that.
So, but he was able to retain it anyway.
Yeah. He did, and he lifted it out of there and took it.
Was there any recourse for him for taking this trove? I mean, this is. Mm-hmm. Are there still operations today to try to identify these sites?
A lot of people killed. A lot of people killed over it. People go crazy over that stuff. You know, that really. I mean, literally, psychotic people. You know, going crazy looking for those troves.
I mean, I'm sure many foreign governments are trying to get their hands on it.
Yeah,
and that's going on to this day.
Yeah.
The United States included, I'm sure.
Covert operations.
Right.
Primarily.
And do you know if any have been successful since?
No, they've not been.
They've not been?
They've not been.
Is it possible they don't exist?
Nope. Not possible at all.
That is just bizarre. And it's these funds that are partially funding these black sites that control a lot of these UFOs and UAPs.
Well, we don't know about that. We don't know yet the linkage of utilizing those 12 troves that they punched they're in the bank, International Credit Bank. We don't know yet that they're being used to fund this. It's perfectly logical to think they would be, since there's such huge money now. Since the gold has gone up to like $1,400, you can find out what it is today. Mm-hmm. Christoph, you can find out what is the price of gold today. But it was that was at $32 an ounce. It was worth $100 billion.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
$3,696.
Yeah, so about $3,700 an ounce.
$3,700 an ounce. So it's 10 times, or no, more than that.
Yeah, more than 10.
But 100 times, 1,000 times.
Wow.
It was $32 an ounce. It's 1,000 times what it was worth then.
I mean, that is just unbelievable. I can't believe I've never heard of this. Wow, that is remarkable.
Yeah. So that I happen to have been privy to that because at Jesuit headquarters, I was called in to brief Mr. I on the consequences of global climate change for the Philippines, with the rising ocean levels. And he asked me to fly in to brief the top 50 businessmen in the Philippines on behalf of the Jesuit order about what the consequences of global climate change were going to be for not only the Philippines, but for the entire the entire Association of Island States in the United Nations. And we were trying to persuade them to mount an action in the General Assembly under the Uniting for Peace resolution of the Charter to impose mandates on the United States and China and Russia and India to stop global climate change because it was destroying the sovereignty of these island states.
Wow.
You know, that's how I was brought in to do it. And that was why they asked me to come to the meeting with them. And then all of a sudden spraying this offer on us saying, look, let me tell you what we got here. And so I just said, no, we're not going to do that.
And why did they want the church to condone it?
They wanted cover. They wanted cover in case they got caught. They could flash the letter from Cardinal Sin saying that he had blessed this, you know, and that the church has been blessing it.
Does the church retain that much power in the Philippines to this day? That
they're pretty Catholic. It's pretty intense. Yeah, it's pretty intense.
That a letter would be worth $10 billion.
Yeah, this was back in This was in 2001 that I had these meetings with them. So that's 24 years ago.
Right. And it's wild to me that the church still would retain that much power, that they would be willing to spend $10 billion just to get the church's approval.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it ever get to Cardinal Sin that this is what they wanted? Did you ever?
I never even told him. I never even talked to him about it.
Wow.
I wouldn't participate in something like that. The Jesuits wouldn't do that.
On a moral basis.
Legal, moral, practical.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wouldn't do that. I told him, I said, that some of that gold, you can tell exactly where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
You know where the Buddha comes from. They knew exactly where it was. They knew where the ingots came from. They took Japanese took all the gold out of the Bank of England in Singapore. When the Japanese came, and they raided the whole bank and took all the gold. It's all UK gold.
Wow.
So he said, you have to return that to the people that have it, that own it. And they just looked at me like,
crazy.
What is this guy?
Wow. So you have these sites that have these craft that Congress can't get into. They're being funded potentially by, these sort of black budget covert
That's right.
troves, or these accounts, now.
Yeah, and money embezzled from other programs that has been appropriated by Congress for other programs, and then is embezzled and sent into these other programs, and they manufacture completely fake papers and records of how it's been spent, and they just, everybody winks and nods at it.
And the reason for not disclosing is primarily for this desire to reverse engineer. Is there another reason they would not want to disclose?
Yeah, and the private aerospace corporations that are partners with them that want to have patents on it, and they want to be able to own it.
So the corporations have a hand in this as well.
Absolutely do.
Similar to the Roswell situation you mentioned before, that they personally benefit greatly from access to this technology.
Absolutely do. And if they could get the patents on them, then they would, for the next 1,000 years, license this technology to the United States. Every time they wanted to build one of these craft to go to another star system, you'd have to license it from, the company, the corporation that would own them.
Are these companies like Boeing or Northrop Grumman, these Lockheed?
Lockheed Martin is one of the big ones.
Interesting.
So, and that's what they want. They want to get patents, and they want to have licensing authority, and they want to own the technology.
So the high brass at Lockheed Martin would have access to these sites.
Some of them do. Some of them do. I mean, others that they have some of the technology placed in their custody to research it and figure out what to do with it, but they don't necessarily know where the craft is. Everybody doesn't need to know that. It's very much need to know.
Right. What's up, beautiful people of America? I am on the road. That's right. I'm doing my hour of stand-up comedy in many cities, some of which are near you. Going to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Chicago. You can get tickets at my website, www.markgagnonlive.com. We also got the link in the description. I would love for you guys to come on out. I say what's up to everybody after the show. If you want to come hang, have some laughs, grab a pic with me, shake my hand, and tell me some crazy story. I would love to see you guys there. Can't wait. Let's get back to the show. And I wonder about like the sensitivity around these crafts. Like, I was mentioning before, like cleaners or, the security guy or the lunch lady. Like, are there no sort of, I guess like low salary, non-essential workers or essential workers that are in this space?
We'll find out all this stuff. We don't know all this, that we're dealing with people primarily that are engineers that have been put into possession of some of the technology and asked to back engineer it, that are working on, for example, this thing called, Prompt Global Strike is one of the programs. Prompt Global Strike. It's in this company, Radiant Technology is the company, and they've got offices, right next to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base out in the 10th District of Ohio. And so they got the congressman from the 10th District of Ohio that's just hair on fire trying to keep this from being made public and opposing the Disclosure Act. Doesn't want it to be passed because they want to keep it secret and get the patent on it.
I see. I'm curious if you have any thoughts as far as like the U.S. space program. Obviously, we're familiar with Operation Paperclip, bringing infamous former Nazi aerospace scientists into the United States to build these programs. Do you believe that the U.S. space program was predicated on any of this type of technology, or do you think that existed in its own?
No, because they're lighting rockets off. I mean, they're like Roman candles. They light the big rocket off and shoot it up in the air. It's totally crazy. They're spending hundreds of billions of dollars just as a cover operation, to pretend that that's the state of their art and trying to get to the moon, and they've got these other craft, that they're working at back engineering that can, move from one star system to another, in a matter of seconds.
But you're suggesting that they haven't successfully reverse engineered this.
I don't believe they have. There's lots of discussion going on right now, and there are different sources that I'm involved in getting to talk to, who have asserted that they have seen the craft functioning, that they've reverse engineered, that they have actual man-made mock-up craft that can perform some of these functions. And there are others who've, drunk the whole Kool-Aid on that deal and believe that we've got actually star-faring craft and that we have an entire division of the U.S. Space Force that are capable of star jumping. But I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's true.
Are you familiar with Jack Parsons?
Sure, I am.
Do you believe that Jack Parsons' occult interests and his desire to understand sort of like the spiritual realm plays any role in his, aerospace or rocket propulsion science, or do you think those two things exist independently?
Actually, the more you know about this whole thing with UFOs, the more you might begin to suspect that they would overlap those areas. But I don't know to what degree he knew about it back then when they set up the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, et cetera, because lots of the stuff at JPL was very nuts and bolts, kind of straight ahead stuff. When you've got to know an awful lot about the UFO stuff before you start crossing into this domain. You start out with the mental telepathy, the ability of the pilots of the craft to telepathically navigate the craft, and that the craft being semi-sentient with the stem cells in their fiber optics, and then you move on from there to other capabilities that the beings have, and then that the people that were involved in doing this research and investigation began discovering that because they realized that telepathy was true, that maybe some of these other psychic things are true. And one of the first things that they were most interested in was psychokinetics. They were trying to see people that could move things, with their mind, move, just push the pen across the table just with their mind, and that they realized that that's true. That's absolutely right, that there are people that can do that.
And is this from sources to you, or this disclosed document?
I've seen it done.
You've seen it done?
Oh, yeah.
By whom?
Oh, yeah. Over Chinese social sciences, Department of Social Sciences, Dr. Zhou Jing, that they've got videos of them doing it. So human beings have the capacity, some people have the capacity to do that. They can actually move things, with just their mind. And that they've now got robots and stuff that you can direct through telepathy to function. They can make little carts go around in a room and stuff like that and direct them psychically. We've got that technology. I mean, and they're working at it, partly because they've seen it done by the ETs, and that they therefore know that they can do that. And they realize that the human beings latently have that capacity, so that once you get into knowing you got it, they can really get into it. And so they're looking for people that are psychic. They've recruited people that are psychic to try to pilot the craft, because the normal pilots that they have, if they take that helmet and put it on them and try to get them to pilot the craft, it kind of fries their brain. And I don't mean to laugh, but it does that. And so we've lost pilots. That we've spent millions of dollars training to fly these super F-18s, et cetera, and it just fries their brain and they're killed.
And
like
is this
that.
the reverse engineered craft? Or is this the actual craft that they use?
Both. They're trying to transport some of the technology from the real craft. They're trying to figure out how to manufacture it, and what they're doing is taking whole technology out of one and trying to put it in the other craft and see if they can make it work. And so what they've done is they've said, look, we better stop doing this. We're running through a lot of well-trained and expensive pilots.
How do they die? Is it
it fries their brain?
Like they'll go like comatose?
They just die. I mean, it just it fries parts of your brain, and the parts of the brain run your heart, run your circulatory system, run your organs, and you die. I mean, that's what happens.
Wow. Yeah.
So what they've done is they started looking for people who are psychic to begin with, to get them to do it, and then they realized that young children tend to be more psychic when they're younger, and then the culture kind of trains it out of them, attacks them for being weird, or something's wrong with you, and that they untrain them to do this, so that they were searching for kids, and they were starting to recruit kids from military bases. They would go into the schools on the military base, and they would go into the families of intelligence officers and stuff to get their kids and test them, because they wanted to kind of keep it in-house so that they wouldn't leak out what they were doing. So they had this entire thing called the GATE program of recruiting young psychic kids. And then they started going into some of the public schools actually looking for them. And they would offer them a position in the GATE program. They would go and meet with their parents and give them large grants to the parents to authorize them to take their child and bring them to one of these GATE schools where they were going to give them special training and full scholarships to go to college and all of that, and that they were searching for the psychic kids.
And where are these GATE schools?
Where are these what?
The GATE schools.
There's one of them is at the base of the Grumman field in the Southwest. There's a place there where they've actually recruited some of the parents, pay them to come to the base and help cook food and take care of the kids.
Wow.
There's a whole program like these things going on.
And these kids matriculate and then go to college?
Yeah.
And have you spoken with them?
I've talked to the people who have spoken to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do these kids live normal lives with this? Do they retain their psychic abilities after the training?
Some leave the program and don't want to be in it because they realize that it's kind of a weapons program, that they're actually training them to try to pilot these craft for military purposes, and they don't want to have anything to do with it, So there's a spectrum of support or opposition to this program, but these things are going on right now, and we were trying to get Congress to get in place to oversee all this, and set the rules and regulations. Not because you can have great confidence that they're going to withstand being manipulated and coerced by the national security state, because these senators and congressmen are just toadies, to the national security state because they're afraid of them. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of the national security state people. Just like Frank Church, who chaired the church committee. His very next election, millions of dollars came pouring in mysteriously to his campaign against him, up in Idaho, publicizing the fact that he supported the Equal Rights Amendment and that he supported registration of automatic weapons. And bango, he was out just like that. After winning 70% of the votes, in his other elections, just got booted right out. Did the same thing to Dick Clark of Iowa, who was opposed to the CIA covert operations in Africa. Did the same thing to was it in Indiana? Anyway, I can't remember his name. Anyway, they will oust sitting senators.
You lose your entire political career by going against this national security state.
I mean, they mount and deploy against members of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives the same criminal covert operations that they've been authorized or believe they've been authorized, or at least they've authorized themselves to engage in against foreign adversaries. And they just turn them on the people who oppose them. I mean, we warned them. I say the civil liberties community people warned them when they were getting ready to pass the National Security Act of 1947. As soon as in May of 1948, the National Security Council issued an executive order authorizing the CIA to engage in covert operations. I mean, they authorized themselves basically to do it.
Right.
And Congress has just acquiesced.
Now, you made a comment before that one of these beings that your friend Oscar spoke to or listened to the correspondence of said that they were sent by who we would call God.
Yes.
What are the implications of that?
Oh, huge.
What could that mean?
Well, what you have to understand, Mark, is that right now we've got the James Webb telescope is up, right? We've had the Hubble up, we had the Max Planck up, we've got these spaceborne observatories that are in the process of identifying these exoplanets now. Just it's only the last 25 years that the scientific community even acknowledged that there were planets anywhere outside of our solar system. You got to understand where we're at in history here, okay? So, this is pretty stunning. So the bottom line is that what's happening is we're entering into an age now where we now recognize that there are other planets. Most of the people in the scientific community acknowledge that there's clearly life elsewhere in the universe. There's obviously very intelligent and highly technologically developed life elsewhere in the universe. And so what the Webb telescope is doing right now is trying to find the exterior boundaries of the actual material universe. You've actually seen the graphic, the pictures of the universe, what it looks like. It's like this big toroidal, with a big funnel of energy like going up through the middle of it. There's famous pictures of it, the radiation field of the, and so that our material universe, they believe to be approximately 13.8 billion years old. 13.8 billion years old. Our star is 4.7 billion years old. Our planet Earth is 3.5 billion years old. Okay? So our species is only like 1 billion years old. Or 300 million years old. Okay? So the bottom line is, what that means is they've now discovered other galaxies out toward the edges of the physical universe that are 13.5 billion years old. The galaxy itself, okay? Which means that there are star systems and planets and stuff inside that galaxy that could be as much as 8-9 billion years older than we are. Okay? And so that they've had all that time even to raise up an entire species and blow themselves to smithereens with their version of nuclear weapons and still come back and still be billions of years in advance of us. Okay? So what they're doing is they're exploring at the very edges of this reality. So the question that arises is, okay, so we find the exterior perimeters of the expansion of all the mass and energy that make up our physical universe. And so you get to the boundaries of that and you say, what's on the other side of that? Okay, what's there? And you have this entire postulate that it could be an absolutely infinite and completely eternal sea of completely undifferentiated consciousness that actually unfolded into being the original discontinuity that through a process of mitosis just replicated itself to the point of generating all of the inchoate quantum fields that actually go into making up every single ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire universe. You take these, the number of periodic elements that we've got in the periodic table, and you reduce it down to one atom of that particular element, and you got so many protons and neutrons and so many electrons, right? And you break them up. We know we can break the atom now, and you break it down into its constituent elements. Because every single one of the atoms of every single element in the periodic table is decaying at its rate of atomic breakdown. That's one of the major signatures of them. There's a certain rate of atomic breakdown, and it breaks down into its component elements. And then each of those elements has its own half-life, and they will break down, and those will break down. And so every single one of the atoms of matter in the universe, the different elements, are breaking down. They're disintegrating. All right, and they disintegrate down into their neutrons and protons and electrons. And what we've discovered is that you can accelerate these particles and smash them together, and they'll break down further. And so that you can break down a neutron or a proton or an electron down into muons and leptons and kleptons, and that you can go down an entire array of these things until you get down to the absolute minimal thing, like around leptons, and you smash two of these together, and they disappear completely. There's no material manifestation of them at all, except that there is, in fact, an inchoate quantum field that remains there, and it will flash right back into a material manifestation in the next 10 billionth of a microsecond into either a wave of energy or a particle of mass. And then it'll flash right out of existence again, out of material existence, right? And then it'll flash back into a wave of energy or particle of mass and blank out of material existence again. And it does that in a sequence that is completely unpredictable. They've monitored it, trying to figure out if they can figure out what the pattern is pursuant to which it chooses to manifest as a wave of energy or a particle of mass. Couldn't figure out how to, unless you direct human intention.
The observer effect.
To it. And if you direct human intention to it, you can affect to a statistically significant degree which of the two things it's going to manifest as. So what's done is this is knocked completely into a cocked hat, the Newtonian, Cartesian, radical materialist worldview. And yet they're still teaching it in high schools.
This is partially the double slit experiment you're describing, that the observer can actually change whether or not this exists as a wave or as a packet, as a photon.
And what they realize is that the entire material universe is made up of these inchoate quantum fields, which are in the next 1/1,000,000th of a microsecond manifesting as either a particle of mass or as a wave of energy. And that there is a decision being made to collapse that wave function, where they're still in a wave frequency, down into a particular manifestation. And that if there is adequate intention directed to the next 10 billionth of a microsecond of it manifesting in a particular choice of all of the different options of reality in the next 10th billionth of a microsecond, that you can actually control reality itself with directed intention. And they know this. Okay? That they have figured this out, because they've had another 9 billion years to investigate the stuff that we are all knocking on the door of right now. Okay? And so that means that they can, in fact, say, okay, here's all of the different myriad realities in the next 10 billionth of a microsecond, one of which has our starcraft being in the Milky Way galaxy instead of here, where we are. And they've discovered some kind of technology, which is called psionic assist, that can ramp up the psychic capacities of a sentient being into the point where they can actually cause the double slit experiment to have it condense into this reality instead of this previous reality. And so that you've got a starship in a particular star system in our galaxy, and they project the reality out of the tens of billions of alternative realities that exist in the other dimension, and they can bring it into material manifestation in our own solar system.
So these extraterrestrials, potentially by using psychic intention, can basically manipulate our reality.
And their reality itself, so that they can transport a craft from a point in the galaxy 50 billion light years away to manifest right inside our own solar system, because it's the double slit experiment.
Now, why would they do that? Like, if their intention hypothetically is to prevent nuclear war or to advocate for environmentalism or whatever the people have speculated that the intention for these beings to be here is, why would they manifest reality to move craft rather than to manifest reality to make it such that Oppenheimer doesn't develop this nuclear capability?
Because that is a much more complex thing in the midst of the flow of people engaging in particular actions and making particular decisions at any given one time. The things that you would have to alter, the number of things you'd have to alter in order to have that happen are so multifarious at that point. But what they do is, it appears that what they're doing is they're obviously coming and going from our planet, right? And they're collecting, flora and fauna. They've been witnessed. Hundreds of different people have seen them, collecting samples and stuff, So they're collecting flora and fauna, and they're collecting genetic material, including human genetic material, right? And so that they could be conceivably, attempting to bring these genetic materials to other planets that have not yet been able to gestate life, but they're capable of sustaining life. And so that they could be seeding the universe of planets to bring life to other planets. And therefore, if we have a total thermonuclear war, that what we're going to do is totally screw this up. We're going to totally annihilate all of the living beings on our planet. And we're going to totally mutate all of the genetic material, over what? Over fighting over who's going to have continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials in a given part of the world so that they can promote their corporations, it's a lack of proper perspective at a minimum, okay? That to be engaged in these kind of short-sighted things. It's like two guys who have no higher consciousness, and they be in a bar, and one guy thinks that he looked at the other girl's butt, and so he's going to get into a fist fight with him. That's just real low consciousness.
Right.
And low consciousness is the inability to perceive the larger context in which you're functioning. This is absurd to do things like that. It's absurd, but only to the extent to which it's completely inconsistent with reality. And if you don't know what the rest of reality is, you don't know that you're acting in a way that's completely disharmonious to reality itself. And so that's why I've always thought that the more people could know about, what's really going on in the galaxy and in our universe, the less likely we are to be engaged in such bizarre, short-term, uninformed, ignorant, fear-generated activity against each other, so that they have a specific interest potentially in keeping us from having a thermonuclear war. Okay, and they've shut off our nuclear missiles. They've shut off our nuclear aircraft carriers. They've completely shut down entire carrier groups, leaving them completely helpless out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. No propulsion, no energy, no communication capacity. An entire carrier group. It's just to say, look, we can do this, but you guys ought to smarten up. You ought to try to avoid doing this. And so the same thing is true that, with the pouring, they say over and over again, you've got to stop polluting your planet. You keep on pouring all these chemicals and stuff into your rivers and into your lakes and pumping all this crap up into the atmosphere. You're ruining your entire climate system. You ought to stop doing this. And so people say, why don't they just do it? Why don't they just stop? And it reminds me that I remember that Lou Elizondo and I had just come from one of the meetings with the Inspector General in the Defense Department, right? And we went to this little restaurant that was closed, but Lou or somebody knew who the people were, so we were all alone. And there were some other guys that were from ATIP, some of the staff that were there. And we were sitting at the table, and one of the guys said, why don't they just come down and stop the people from doing these awful things? And I said, really, you got to remember, there's a famous story about this little boy who loved butterflies, and he collected all kinds of different butterflies. And he had out in his backyard, he had this great big mesh net with all the butterflies flying around inside it and stuff. And he wanted to find a perfect specimen of a monarch butterfly. And he finally found this cocoon of a monarch butterfly, perfect cocoon. He brings it back home. He puts it in this little box with cotton in it, and he puts little lights on it to keep it warm. And he's watching it, observing it, waiting for it kind of to go through this metamorphosis. And finally, it gets to the point where the butterfly is trying to break out of the cocoon. And it's struggling and struggling against the cocoon. And it finally breaks out of the cocoon and is struggling against this last silken thread of the cocoon. And it's pushing and slapping its wings and flopping all over the place, and the little boy's watching it, and he starts to feel really sorry for this butterfly. So he goes and he gets a little pair of scissors, and he snips the last little silken thread, and the butterfly comes loose. And it's an absolute perfect specimen of a monarch butterfly, except that it can never fly. Because it turns out that it was in struggling against that last silken thread that it had to develop the muscle structure that enabled it to fly. And so that's what's happening here, is that they're watching us, monitoring us, waiting for us to develop, the kind of muscle structure and the kind of moral fabric that we have to be trusted to come into a community with them. If we can figure out the star jump technology, our guys that are presently in charge of this program are perfectly willing to mount up with nuclear weapons and just star jump right to their star system, to their planet, and say, let's get rid of these guys as a potential threat against us, or they're potentially going to interfere with us, mining the asteroid fields or something. The level of consciousness that our people are at right now is so low that they're afraid of allowing us to come into the community. And so that what they're doing is they're trying to seed all kinds of information to us, bringing people aboard their craft and saying, let us tell you something. You got to do everything that you can do to try to get all these sides to get rid of these nuclear weapons. This is totally crazy what you're doing to yourself. Showing those little kids at the aerial school, the kind of, trees without leaves and deserts as far as you can see and stuff on our planet because of our not paying attention to protect our own climate system. These are things that they're doing. It's all by indirection and trying to seed, ideas to us. I'm saying that this is what's going on. And what we're dealing with is people with extremely low consciousness. Not that they're not smart. Some of the people in the intelligence community are extremely smart, and people who are in the military are really pretty smart people, but that their perspective is so limited. That they're so tunnel visioned about what their assignment is, that they've been raised in this culture of believing that. I talked to one of the fellows who said that, if there's this third world country that has got some natural resource that is of real value to us, well, we should go and take it. Because if we don't go take it, China will go take it, or Russia will go take it. So we'll go take it first. I was like, well, don't you understand? That's aggressive war. That's completely a violation of all of the just war theories. No, it's not. That's all just a bunch of language, they say. They don't have any sense of moral constraint at all. And so that what we're trying to do is that I started working at this stuff from Jesuit headquarters. That I was there as a candidate for the Jesuit priesthood. And I was, in their social ministry office trying to figure out what the public policies were for all 15 of the major cabinet level offices in all 8 of the major federal agencies. That's what I was doing. I was, I studied it all at Harvard College and had all these different, Kissinger for foreign policy and had all these other Reisman for sociology, all that stuff, and went on to the Harvard Law School. And, so I said, I'm prepared to help on this. I know how the government works. I know how the different departments are. I know what all the different committees are about. Let's start figuring out what policies we ought to have here. And one of the things that the Jesuit order was devoted to was the elimination from our planet of thermonuclear weapons. Because the superior general of the Jesuits was Pedro Arrupe. When I was there, Pedro Arrupe was a surgeon, a medical doctor from Spain. He was from the Basque territory of Spain. He was a surgeon, a medical doctor, and had decided to become a Jesuit priest back in the 1930s in Spain. And he started preaching from the pulpit against Franco, saying that Franco was a fascist and an authoritarian, and just like Mussolini and Hitler, that these guys, it was a really bad idea here that these guys have got. This is going to come to the ruination of our whole country. And he began preaching about that. And it turns out that Mussolini had assigned a 3-man team to go kill him. And one of the guys felt so bad about being ordered to go kill a priest that he went to confession. And in the confessional, he said, "Father, I got this real problem here. I'm a patriot. I support Franco. I've been instructed to go kill this priest, and I feel really terrible about it." And so he confessed it. And so the priest gets done with the confessional. He goes and talks to his bishop and says, "I got a problem here. I got this guy in the confessional that said he's assigned to kill this guy, Pedro Arrupe." And so the bishop calls the Jesuit provincial, and says, your guy's getting set to be killed. You got to get him out of here. So they take Pedro Arrupe and they put him in a monastery to hide him out. And it turns out that it's a Zen monastery. And so he ends up being in this Zen monastery throughout the duration of World War II, until it turns out that it was in Hiroshima. So he was up in this monastery high in the mountains outside of the city of Hiroshima when we dropped the bomb on it, and on August 6th of 1945, and it completely knocked down the entire monastery. It collapsed all the buildings and stuff, but he was far enough away that it didn't kill him, but it knocked the whole place in, and it knocked him out. He regained consciousness, and all he could see in the wreckage was the clock that was on the wall all stopped. And he said he realized that regular time had stopped, that we had entered into a new era where whatever this horrible weapon was, that it spelled the potential doom of our entire species. And he climbed out of the rubble and organized all the other monks to go down into the city of Hiroshima and led the people out from under the mushroom cloud before it all came and fell down on everybody else and poisoned everybody. And he led these people up into the mountains and attended to them as a medical doctor, surgeon, and then devoted himself to trying to get rid of nuclear weapons. So his apostolate, his mission as a Jesuit had become getting rid of nuclear missiles, right, and weapons. So he, all the way from 1945, all the way up to 1962, which is 20 years, whatever it is, that he was working on that. And what happened is when Pope John the 23rd replaced Pius the 12th, who had signed the Concordat with the Nazis, that when John the 23rd decided he was going to convene Vatican II, now we get to your mom and the folks, right? That when he was going to convene Vatican II, he wanted to have a committee on ecumenical relations with other religions. And so he picked Pedro Arrupe because he was Zen. He was like a Zen Buddhist now. And so he brought him in to chair the Committee on Ecumenism, or Ecumenical Relations. So he was in Rome in 1962 when the Superior General of the Jesuits died. And so John the 23rd suggested Pedro Rupe to be the new superior general of the Jesuits. Well, that's the kiss of death. The Jesuit provincials will never pick a guy that the Pope picks, because then he wouldn't have any independence at all as an order, right? And so there wasn't any chance they were going to pick him. But it turns out that the Secretary of State for Pius XII was still alive in 1962, Cardinal Villot, who had been a Vichy French Nazi, supporter of the Vichy French, right? And so it was an aggressive advocate of signing the Concordat with the Nazis. Mm-hmm. And so he ended up being so freaked out about the fact that Pedro Rupe had been recommended by John XXIII to be the superior general.
He kiboshed it.
He said, I'm going to the conclave. So all 100 provincials from around the world were called into Rome, just like they do the cardinals, mm-hmm. to pick a new pope. They brought in all 100 of the Jesuit provincials, and they were in conclave. And Cardinal Villot violated all of the normal norms and went over to where the conclave was and started going around buttonholing the different provincials, saying, you can't vote for this guy, Rupe. He's a communist. He opposed Franco. So they were all saying, really? He opposed Franco? And he said, yeah. And they said, oh, we better take another look at this guy. And so they chose him. They chose Pedro Rupe to be the superior general of the Jesuits in 1962. Right?
Wow.
And so the provincials, the 100 provincials are still there in Rome, and they're going to go to the Jesuit, which is the big international headquarters for the Jesuits. It's right next to the Basilica. And so they go in there to have this little soiree, with drinks and hors d'oeuvres and hang out and get to meet the guy, right? So they come in and all the furniture is gone. And there's no cigarettes, there's no hors d'oeuvres, there's no drinks. All there are is 100 Zafu pillows sitting there in this big semicircle waiting for the guys to come in. And here's Pedro sitting in a Zen meditation waiting for him. And they're all going, what is this all about? Who is this guy? Do we get another chance to vote for somebody else? And so they finally all grumble and they take their shoes off and they sit down on these little Zafu pillows. And Pedro is just there and he just opens his eyes up like this and he says, I have seen the end times. He said to him, I was there. He said, and we have got to do something about this. We are the order that was established in 1537 to reform this church. This church was selling indulgences and, it was gross and, murdering people, everything, with the Medicis and everything. We've got to take up the task of reforming this church. He said, we've been spending the last 100 years hanging out in royal courts and waiting to speak the prophetic word into the ear of the king, at the auspicious moment, and palling around with all these rich people, and we're not doing our job. So he said, look, we're going to have to undertake some radical change in the church and in everything else here. He said, and this is now 1962. Right when they're getting set to do Vatican II. So he says, we're going to have to take some dramatic steps to open the church up, to get the laity to participate in this, to basically try to get them to understand that, that the church back in the 1000, the first 1,000 years of the church, the treaty of, the various conclaves that they had, that they inserted themselves, the priesthood inserted themselves right in between the infinite and the eternal and the laity. And said, the laity, it's not your job. It's not your job to try to experience God. It's not your job to try to experience the numinous experience. That we're in charge of that. We'll handle this for you. You come, you come to church every Sunday. You do what we tell you to do on the holy days of obligation. You don't have to understand what we're saying in the Mass. We'll do it in Latin because it's got you guys all, you really love the Latin. Oh, this is really mysterious. I don't know what the fuck you're saying, but I don't care because it's really, really interesting, and we'll, blow smoke on you and we'll ring the bells. We'll do all these kind of things. It's like neuro-linguistic programming. That will get you into this kind of state of euphoria where you're open to listening to us, and they're saying that's the best we can figure out what to do because 99.9% of all the people are completely illiterate. They can't read anything. They don't travel more than 50 miles away from the place where they were born.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out this way of us, going to monasteries and sitting and meditating and doing all this kind of stuff and developing these faculties, and then we'll figure out how to tell you what to do. Well, how's that working for us? How's that working for us? Not well at all. We're on the brink of totally destroying ourselves with thermonuclear war. That we got 10 million people dying of starvation every year. We got people dying of diseases that we've known the cure for 100 years. And while other people are, buying yachts and having country homes and stuff, this is not working. We've got to do something about this. What we've got to do is we've got to devote ourselves to taking steps to disassemble the structural sources of injustice. Not just in Western civilization, but in Eastern civilization as well. This whole violation of individual human rights and stuff in the Eastern countries. That's our job. Okay? Most of you aren't capable of doing this, you said. You smoke cigarettes, you drink alcohol all the time. You said, half of you got mistresses that totally compromise you. I said, so you may not be able to make it. But, if you can, I'd love to have you help us in this. He said, but what I'm going to do is order you now all to have to start engaging in 40 days of complete silent retreats every single year. Every single one of you. Okay? And for you to search your soul and to meditate and fast and do the things that we know that are helpful in developing your spiritual consciousness. Not smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey and carousing with rich people and, Knights of Columbus and, Knights of Malta and all these things that you guys are doing. You got to do this. He said, and so that I'll call you back. He said, but I may have to replace a bunch of you. This is 1962. Okay. This is the time period when, in 1962, later on, October, is the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Where Kennedy had in 1960, in April, after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, had promised Nikita Khrushchev that Kennedy would stop the raids and stuff that were going on down against Cuba, that were all being run by Richard Nixon under Eisenhower. He was the vice president under Eisenhower from 1952 to 1960. He ran the 5412 committee that ran all covert operations pursuant to the National Security Act of 1947, right? Okay. And so that Kennedy promised that he would stop all those attacks, and he just lied to Khrushchev. And he just changed it from Operation 40 to Operation Mongoose and just continued the operations. And so Khrushchev says, screw you, I'm putting missiles into Cuba.
Right. And Fidel teams up with Khrushchev.
So he starts sending missiles in to protect this island against overthrow by the United States military, blah blah, and gets a foothold in Western civilization, so we have the whole Cuban Missile Crisis, right? We come to within like a minute and a half of having a total thermonuclear war. And we know all the details about that now. Mm-hmm. We know that Curtis LeMay, who was the head of he's the chief of staff of the United States Air Force, wanted to have a thermonuclear exchange with Russia. Mm-hmm. He was convinced that we would only lose 40 million people, but we would wipe them out. We were vastly superior to them. We'd wipe them out, and we could come back from losing 40 million people. Mm-hmm. Russia had come back from losing 20 million people in the war, and that was Curtis LeMay. And so he actually gave the order without any presidential authorization to go to DEFCON 2 without any authorization of the president at all, and he did it in the open.
Wow!
So that all the Russians would hear him, and went to DEFCON 2, and ordered the U-2 flight over Russia, which was going to do all the final retargeting of all the missiles, okay, to try to instigate a nuclear war. And Kennedy found out about this, and they finally stopped it, but like a minute and a half short of Russia having to launch their missiles, all right? And so Kennedy and Khrushchev were so completely traumatized. This is 1962. This is right when Pedro Rupe comes in. This is when John the 23rd is the Pope, right? And so what Kennedy and Khrushchev start doing is they start exchanging a series of completely confidential letters to each other. And they have this guy named Norman Cousins, carries them back and forth, 18 letters back and forth and back and forth, not authorized by the CIA, not cleared by the State Department, not even informing them that it was going on. And the two of them decide that what they're going to do is they're going to exercise their respective executive powers to start disassembling the nuclear warheads of the entire arsenals of the Soviet Union and the United States and destroying them. Not putting them on a shelf so they could just be put back on in 48 hours, but just destroy them, okay? And all of that's going on. And what Kennedy decides is that what he's going to do is to make up for the lack of massive spending on this hugely expensive nuclear weapons program in the United States and in Russia. They're going to have the economic stimulus of having a joint space program. That what they're going to do is have a joint Soviet-United States space program exploring the other star systems, okay? And what he does is on June 5th of 1963, he sends an order to John McCone, who is the new CIA director, ordering him to brief Kennedy on all the UFO stuff. He knows it's there. He knows that he hasn't been briefed on it. He wants to have the information because he's going to share it with Khrushchev, saying, if we're going to have a joint space program, I want you to know what it is we know because we're going to encounter these beings and we want to get you to know about this. So he notifies John McCone that he wants to get the briefing on this. McCone tells the other guys in the CIA, Bissell and Angleton and the others, they go right straight to Allen Dulles. And even though Dulles had been fired back in December after the Cuban Missile Crisis,
humiliated by Kennedy,
Dulles has never left Washington. He's got the big townhouse over in Georgetown, functionally running the CIA because he's legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers Harriman is the one that's made up of all of those private investors, which are the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Harrimans, the people who own the steel industry, they own the railroads, they own the agribusiness corporations. They're the robber barons, right? And they've all come together in this Brown Brothers Harriman operation that they've got, right? And at the end of World War I, that when the Bolsheviks overthrew Tsar Nicholas II, right, and threw him out and established the Bolshevik government, the Secretary of State, Robert Lansing, orders this military expedition into Russia to try to kill the Russian Revolution in the cradle, right? And it turns out that Robert Lansing is the son-in-law of John W. Foster, who was the Secretary of State under William Henry Harrison, who had overthrown the Hawaiian Islands, was the one that initiated this huge age of American imperialism. It's called that in high school civics, right? And it started to set the stage for the 1898 Spanish-American War to overthrow Cuba and all that. And his two grandsons, John W. Foster, are John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles, both of whom were lawyers in Sullivan and Cromwell, which is legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman.
So what happens when Dulles finds out about this plan to talk to Khrushchev?
Dulles greenlights the assassination team that had been put together by Richard Nixon back in 1960 to kill Fidel Castro, to kill the president, because he's a traitor. He's having completely secret negotiations with Khrushchev and has decided he's going to disassemble the nuclear warheads of our United States military arsenal. He said, and so that we can't wait a year for the next elections, we're going to kill him. And you've already been trained to kill Castro. You've been trained down in Oaxaca, Mexico, on the ranch of who was it? Anyway, the guy owned a ranch down in Oaxaca, Clint Murchison Jr., his name is. And I know the guy that trained him. It's Carl Jenkins, was the guy that trained him in triangular rifle fire to kill a moving target. And the thing, those are the guys that killed him. And Dulles says, this guy's a traitor. You want to kill him anyhow. because he, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, shut down all the military bases, shut off all of that Operation 40, which is now Mongoose. So you guys have your own reason wanting to kill him. Go ahead and kill him. And that's what they did.
And then Kennedy gets killed, and they set up the Warren Commission, and who's in charge of that?
And Dulles is the main guy. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the request to get the information about the UFO stuff played a role in triggering the decision to kill him, not because he was asking for the UFO stuff, was because it revealed the fact that as soon as he realized that something was going on, they investigated and found out he was exchanging these letters with Khrushchev. And once he found out what the decision was that they were making in the letters, he said, that's it. Let's get this guy.
It was the attempt to denuclearize and lose the Americans.
He was going to eliminate the nuclear weapons. And they, in Brown Brothers Harriman, knew that they needed the nuclear weapons. Not against Russia, against China. This is where the China lobby sits, is in Brown Brothers Harriman. These are the ones who decided at the end of World War I that what they were going to do is they were going to turn their attention to developing the entire Pacific and all the Asian markets for them, and they were going to put Germany in charge of Europe. And so what they did, Brown Brothers Harriman, the CEO of Brown Brothers Harriman, George Herbert Walker, steps down and retires, turns the CEO position over to Prescott Bush, his son-in-law. He goes and founds the Union Bank of New York. And it's capitalized by all these rich guys that are in Brown Brothers Harriman. They capitalized the bank. They set up a foreign subsidiary up in the Netherlands called the Bank of Shipping and Commerce, run by this guy Fritz Thyssen. They financed the construction of the international headquarters of the Third Reich to establish Germany as the bulwark against Bolshevism in Europe. And that's a true fact.
Wow.
That's where it came from. That whole operation, because they believed in the same theory that Mussolini said, is that you utilize the instrumentalities of your government to serve the interests of the private corporations, and that they can, in fact, then maintain their continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials that are needed by their major corporations.
What's up, people? We're going to take a break because we got new merch. That's right. It is the holiday season, and the good folks over at Camp R&D have been cooking up in the lab. We got the Christmas sweaters with the aliens. We got the Christmas sweaters with the conspiracy vibes. You already know. I mean, this one might be my favorite one. A Christmas tree full of aliens. Full Christmas sweater energy. And then, of course, if you just want something simple, you bust out the camp logo tee with the little Christmas lights on it. Come on, bro. Get cute for Christmas, okay? It is a holiday season, all right? We're celebrating the birth of the Savior, okay? And what better way to do it than to cop a couple threads for the person in your life that loves the campsite, that loves hanging with us every single week. And right now, we're running a promo through the holidays. That's right. Use the promo code Christmas Camp for 15% off. I just made that up on the spot, but I think we can do it, right?
I'll call some people.
Christmas Camp for 15% off.
Sure.
16% off.
Whatever you say, Mark.
Should we give them more?
One more.
17% off, people. I think this is going to work. I'm not positive. We're going to see if we can do it. But I'll, check it out, guys. We got all the camp stuff going until the end of the year. Check it out. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. I love you all. God bless and Merry Christmas. How much do you think family bloodlines play a role in maintaining this corporate interest in these raw materials?
Well, for the most part, the shares of stock are passed down generationally. But it's primogeniture doesn't work that well. I mean, they tried it in the royal families, and you end up with these morons, of the kids, or the playboys that don't have any kind of training, or they don't care about what they're doing, and they of course can't have their daughters take over because they're such, they're so biased against women. And so the bottom line, it doesn't work that well. That's why the Majestic group that Truman set up is each of them got to pick their successor, but they weren't picking their eldest son. They were motivated by high mission, and that they picked the person that they thought was the most competent possible person who could be carrying on this extraordinarily secret program to be able to establish complete control over this technology, so they could develop the weapon system that would put them an entire 2 generations ahead of everybody else, of being able to have a propulsion system to move their craft, to propel a nuclear payload from launch into the heart of Russia or China within 2 minutes.
I see. So where does that leave us with God?
That leaves us with the fact that if you believe that it's possible that these extraterrestrial beings, who may have had an additional 8 or 9 billion years more to investigate these issues that we ourselves have been dealing with, which has to do with the relationship of this consciousness that abides within us, that is conditioned, by the place where you're born, is conditioned by who your relatives are. You've got genetic dispositions that are in you from your ancient ancestors. You have almost certainly astrological predilections. I mean, if you've ever talked to a person who is a really accomplished astrologer, they'll sit right there and tell you, all the description of who your wife is. What your favorite colors are, what your favorite pastimes are. You sit there and go, what the hell is this all about? And because you don't know any better, that there are just these kind of dispositions that you have, because, everybody knows that the moon, for example, attracts and sucks off hundreds of trillions of tons of water off to one side of the planet every single day. Because of the attraction of each unit of matter in the universe is attracted to every other one. And so that this attraction that it has for the water sucks it all off onto one side of the planet every day on the side of where the moon is. So that there are these tractor forces that are operating on the planet all the time. It's just a fact question. It's a fact question whether during the gestation of your self, in the body that you're going to be inhabiting, the genetic material of 24 of the chromosomes from your mother and 24 from your father joined together form the original cell. And then it, through mitosis, generates additional cells until the blastula is developed. And then the embryo, the zygote, develops in the womb in this pool of fluid to which they're exposed to all of these different tractor forces. True, not any doubt about it. Just like we got radio waves and stuff going through us here. That they're tractor force. It's just a fact question whether that has some effect upon you. And the fact of the matter is, the reason why it's so important is to know where you were born, physically where you were. It isn't where you were born so much, it's where you were gestated. Because you were then subjected for a whole 9 months to the particular confluence of forces that your mother's womb was exposed to during all this period of time in which you were gestated. And so the question is, can that have any effect upon your dispositions? And I'm just telling you, I can absolutely guarantee you, if you have a really accomplished, and they're not mind readers or anything like that, they just know what the data says about people that were born in this, gestated in this particular physical space, in this particular time with the given configuration. And here's the kind of unreflecting dispositions that you'll have. But if you don't know it, you just think they're your own best ideas, coming from your own mother wit. But it's not. Just like your genetic material. That whole thing where your grandmother will say, look at Mark, look at that. He walks just like his grandfather. Look at that. Did you see that? And like some of the young women, they'll say, you see how she does that thing with her hair like that? That's just like her aunt used to do, her grandmother used to do. And she never even met her. They're just these things that you do that are unconscious. And they come up out of your cellular training. You have cellular memory from all these things. And so that we know that what we're trying to do in meditation is you're trying to transcend in consciousness all of these kind of predispositions that are not subject to your own conscious decision. And as you elevate more and more in higher consciousness, and you get into a place where you can actually get into the state of meditation, where all you're doing is paying attention to your breathing in and breathing out, and breathing in and breathing out, and you're sitting in a position where tens of thousands of other human beings down through the centuries have sat in that exact same posture, same breathing in, breathing out. And what you do is you discover that you get to a state of consciousness where you've transcended all of these other predilections, and that you dwell in that place. And that what happens is you start to discern things there. They had a set of experiments that were actually done at Downstate Medical Center back in 1965, I think it was, in that they brought together like an Indian faker, a Buddhist monk, a Trappist monk, a bunch of others. Excuse me. And they brought them all together, and they had them get in this little booth they had. They had this booth with this computer on the top. Had these thousands of little hair-thin cilia that hung down into the booth that could discern minuscule voltage differentiation between one filament and the other. And they would have you get in. They say, here, each of you get in this little booth and do that thing that you guys do, And what happens is each and every one of them, they would get in the booth. They would either kneel down, squat down, sit down. They would get into a posture where their back was completely erect, like this. And the second thing that they would do is they would start to chant. They would start a prayer or a chant or some kind of mantra that they would start doing, and that they would, exhale all the air, and then they'd inhale the air, and then they'd, and so they got doing that. And then they discovered that the third thing they discovered is that the amount of time they spent exhaling doing this chant or prayer and the time they spent inhaling was virtually identical, even though they did entirely different prayers and different chants and stuff. And then the fourth thing that they discovered is that the alpha waves in their brain would start becoming more and more pronounced, because they had them in electrocephalograms and electrocardiograms. They had them all hooked up to the very scientific, this thing they were doing, right? And they discovered that the alpha waves started increasing dramatically in their brain. And then the fifth thing they discovered is that the photoplasma around their body, this energy field around their body, started energizing. And it was kind of pulsing kind of lightly around their body, and that with these cilia that were hanging down all around them, they could actually monitor it at that time. That was the technology that they had available, and they could tell that the energy envelope that was being generated by your body, that the center of it was inside your body. It was inside your body, below your heart, and like by your solar plexus, inside your body, right? And then they discovered that that this energy envelope around your body, as you got deeper and deeper into the meditation, would start to pulsate in direct sync with your heartbeat. And so that they had these people there chanting, breathing, electric field just pulsing like this in direct sync with their heartbeat. And what they concluded is that their body, the human body, functions like a crystal radio set, that it can actually pick up the bonding phenomenon that bonds every single ultimately irreducible energy of matter in the entire universe into unity with every other one. And that there's this entire unified field that bonds the whole universe together, and it has a very particular frequency, with a particular amplitude and pitch, and that what it does is that you can actually directly, experientially engage with this phenomenon, and that it downloads information.
And is that God?
It's no, this is just inside the material universe. This is just inside the material universe. This is all of that voodoo shit. This is all that stuff of that people can get psychic abilities. They can see the future. They can tell the past. There's a whole set of occult kind of things that people can do with this stuff, right? But the question that remains is there another capacity that the human body has that can actually go outside of this entire field, a unified field, and go outside the physical limitations of the material universe and experience the infinite and eternal. And if you get into that complete state, it's a state where you are in complete union with the infinite and eternal. And that you're not troubled by any of the idiosyncrasies or any of the kind of sub-messaging, that you're in this state of perfect quiescent being, And then the question is, can you still move around okay? Can you get up and walk around? Can you conduct yourself? And this is the state that you're in when, in fact, you are in union with the infinite, the Father, the source of all being, and you discover that you are in direct union with this. It doesn't mean you're God. What it means is that God is not a person,
a localized being.
Yeah, not like a Homo sapien. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to worry about. You mean that God might be a reptile? No, but he's not a Homo sapien either, and it's not a he. And it's not a noun. It's not a noun. It's a verb. It's an intransitive verb, non-transitive verb of being, simple being. Okay, in that all of the efforts to thingify it, to nounify it, to genderize it, all this kind of stuff are all functions of our culture, of different cultures on the planet.
Can Catholics attain this through prayer?
Well, not with authority from the church yet, because the church still is in that mindset of interposing itself between this experience and the infinite and eternal. That they think that it's like sinful, it's like occult. It's you're defying the authority of the hierarchy of the church.
Can Buddhists access it?
Yes, that's part of the Hindus and Buddhists and Catholic Trappist monks and nuns and stuff that actually do the meditation, Jesuits that do the Ignatian spiritual exercises, but that they've restricted it to people in the professed religious life. They haven't shared it with the laity, and so now they're starting. Something's going wrong here. I mean, they're losing the grip on everybody.
How do we know it's good?
Pardon?
How do we know that it's good?
Because knowing more is always better. Not allowing other people to keep secrets from you and manipulate you, because they assume that you're not capable of making your own decisions about yourself, is usually a bad idea. And it just coincidentally tends to inure to the benefit of those that are keeping the secret. And they just say it just happens to be coincidental, but it's not, Now, that doesn't mean that the average Joe, that is driving a truck or something and doesn't pay any attention to anything but watching football, all of a sudden you're going to plug him into the wall and he's going to have this experience and he's going to, do anything much with it. But the fact of the matter is, this is the salvation dynamic. This is the salvation dynamic.
What about the Garden of Eden?
Garden of Eden is a metaphor. It's a metaphor that harkens all the way back into the primordial origins. You read Teilhard. I mean, Teilhard de Chardin writes about this at some length, all about the phenomenon of man. He's the Jesuit paleontologist that discovered Peking man, actually. And he said, look, I know how to do this. Let me tell you, that you need to really understand that Jesus was displaying and actually said, that you will do much greater things than I, eventually, and do not pay so much attention to what it is that I'm saying to you. It's what I am. Understand what I am. That Jesus was the demonstration out of time of where our human family is evolving. That we're evolving these kind of capacities the ability to lay hands on and heal people, to reestablish the electric balances in the system of the human body that are extraordinarily subtle, to levitate, walk on water, transmute water into wine. The high siddhas can do this, and all the church says is, don't pay attention to that. Nothing to see here. Don't go looking into all these other Sufis and Hindus and stuff like that, because Jesus is the only one. It's the only one, and that's totally common to tribalism.
Now, when you say knowing more is always better, do you see any similarities with the Garden of Eden, that the serpent might appear to Adam and Eve and say, "Oh, eat from this tree, you'll know more"?
That's a very interesting image of what that is all about, of suggesting that you have to remain completely subservient to the quote will of God, in that this serpent who is of the world is going to try to lure you into believing that just by getting more knowledge that you can be superior to God. That's true enough in itself. It's clear that just a whole bunch of additional information isn't necessarily going to make you a saint. That there's an openness of the heart, there's an openness to love, and in the kind of unctuous, supportive, loving nature of the universe and of all reality that you have to open yourself to, and to share that type of joy, the good news, with everyone. That's a calling that you have, but I don't think it's a proper thing to demonize or serpentize, if you will, knowledge, like it's the enemy of good or of innocence. That there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, you can go through all kinds of portions of the Bible and say, here, you have to go in and seize the land of Israel and crush the heads of babies with the stones and bury their women and kill them all. You go, excuse me, I don't think so. I mean, you can get carried away and suggest that I'm somehow unreligious, if I don't think that's a good idea, but so I'm not worried about that, about people saying, oh, you're not accepting literally the translation of the Bible, and not taking it as a directive of things that you're supposed to do. But what people do is they tend to scan the entire writings, not only the writings of the Bible, but of the New Testament and the Gospels and the so-called missing Gospels, of Thomas and the others. But I think that the war against the Gnostics, is inside the Catholic Church, is perfectly understandable why they would do it. But that it's totally unsupportable. The Gnostics are the people that were actually trying to strengthen this type of direct experience that people could have of the numinous, of the infinite and the eternal. Now you'll know them by their fruits. As to whether or not that turns to them being really wonderful, decent people, but I think that the Gnostic writings that really come from the tablets from Anarabi or whatever it was called, that found the tablets, that those are all important additions to the scriptures.
And Nag Hammadi.
Yeah, the Nag Hammadi. In the King James version of the Bible, there's all kinds of scholarship about it now. You look at there's a book, I should know what the name of it is, that tracks the entire process by means of which they compiled the King James version of the Bible, and the things they excluded and the things that they rewrote and the things like that. You shouldn't be surprised about it. I mean, it's the way our human family is. But to have people that, that lock onto that King James version of the Bible and interpret it as absolutely, totally literal, and into the point of demonizing anybody who doesn't believe it, it's just a further example of kind of primitive tribalism, of segments of our human family.
Do you think people have used these meditative abilities to download bad things or evil things?
It's clear that there are people who have been blessed with capabilities, evolutionary qualities that haven't had the kind of moral training that they should have, and that they have over the course of their youth and into their adulthood, they've learned to kind of utilize those things for their own personal short-term benefit, into the point where they, as grown-ups, they're into manipulating and utilizing this, and it actually finds some of its manifestation in these high, weird, evil occult gatherings, where they run into some of those kind of people that have got some of these kind of skills that are completely unmorally moored. Yeah. So the people can do that. People can use some of these kind of abilities for immoral activities.
When Aleister Crowley summons Lamb, this demon that he sort of sketches, what do you make of that? And can we pull an image up of that?
Yeah, I think this Aleister Crowley stuff and people playing around with these kind of skills is dangerous stuff. It's dangerous stuff.
It's always significant to me that in the 30s, I believe, he summoned this entity that looks, stereotypically alien.
Well, I'll admit that it has that look. Their eyes are not really the alien eyes. The kind of the huge head is big. That they have in common, but that the alien beings have virtually no nose structure like that. And the eyes are very, very different. They're much, much bigger than that, and they go all the way around to their temples. But I see what it is you're saying. I've never actually seen that picture. I've never paid that much attention.
Oh, really?
So as soon as I bumped into Crowley and realized,
no, thank you.
I'm not going there. I'm not particularly liking this guy.
Right.
I don't think he's doing the right stuff. So I didn't really pursue that very much. I just gave a lecture at the Los Angeles Philosophical Society, and I was in the green room waiting while all the crowd and stuff came in. I kind of snuck out the back, went over to their little library that they had there, and they had one of the great big Aleister Crowley books, about all the secrets and stuff.
Thelema.
Yeah, what was it? And I wouldn't even get it. They could offer it to me for free, and I wouldn't take it. That's not a good idea. You don't want to exclude yourself from even knowing about any of it. But I don't mess with that stuff.
Right. I'm curious about the Seth tapes. Have you ever heard of these?
Yes, I've heard Seth stuff. Yeah.
Do you think this is channeling some type of legitimate spiritual practice?
Our institute's going to have to really research these things specifically. There's several of these channelers that are indicating that they're in direct communication with an extraterrestrial being. I think it's worth evaluating. I don't think that it's necessarily not true, but I don't credit any particular one of them right now. But I used to kid about people picking up messages on their molars. So I used to refer to it. Yeah, this person's either picking up messages from Mars on their molars.
Yeah.
But that was being a little too flippant. That I don't know that. To the extent to which a person can stand face to face with and have telepathic communications, that the indication is that telepathic communications are possible over distances. So, but these are major distances that they're talking about. They're talking about like 1 billion miles or something like that. I'm not certain yet.
Right.
What we're trying to do is we were trying to get past this stage 1 of getting the Congress to actually stand up to and try to assert its constitutional obligation to oversee the activities that are being undertaken by these executive branch agencies. That's what we were trying to do to begin with as a constitutionalist. I'm disappointed that they haven't done it, that they haven't risen to the occasion, that they have either chickened out specifically in the face of some kind of coercion, or that they've just, failed to see the importance of what it is that we're talking about here.
Right.
Whatever it is, we're not going to take it lying down, and so that we're continuing to mobilize the regular people to get people educated about the data that is here. We're trying to get more and more of the data and make it available. If the government, Congress isn't going to do it, we'll do it ourselves. That's what we're going to do. And we've proven in the past that we're perfectly capable of doing these kind of things. Everybody was sitting there wringing their hands over the Contras and saying, I think that maybe the administration is really giving them weapons. I said, really? Do you plan to do anything about it? So we've done that. Saying, that people think Karen Silkwood was murdered. Really? Are you going to do anything about it?
Nope.
And so we did. We found out who did it, and we, shut down the entire facility that they were running. So we've got experience in doing this. So we're quite confident that we're going to be able to figure out a lot of this information. Yeah, I've got a lot of the information already, and I've absolutely refused to take a security clearance. No, thank you. I'm not going to do it because I intend to tell the people, basically everything that I find out, and they can not tell me if they want to. That's fine, but that's not going to stop us from getting that.
Do you meditate on your personal life?
Yes.
Have you had any of these experiences where you feel like you're in direct contact
with the extraterrestrials? No.
With the divine, with consciousness?
No, I still am in a kind of a much more humble kind of perspective. That I just realized that I know that I can get to a point of transcending kind of inclinations that I've got, the other normal Irish inclinations and tough football, nasty linebacker kind of vibes that I have, that I've been able to kind of transcend many of those. It helps me, like if I'm sitting doing the deposition of the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan in North Carolina that's just gunned down, 6, doctors who came down to try to set up a union to deal with brown lung, that I've now avoided leaping across the table and grabbing him by the lapels and thrashing him. So I'm improving along step by step, I'm working at it.
If people want to support you on your mission to ultimately reach this disclosure and uncover this great secret, where can people find it?
You go to the internet and you go to newparadigminstitute.org. Easier, you can go to Romero. It's easier. A lot of people can't spell New Paradigm. No, but Paradigm, paradigm. But you go to the Romero Institute, Romero, Romero Institute. It's named after Archbishop Oscar Romero, who was assassinated down in El Salvador for trying to organize peasants to oppose the death squads down there. And so that, that we've been earlier we were the Christic Institute, but George Bush Sr., when he got unelected in 1992, issued a direct order to the Internal Revenue Service director to yank our 501c3 tax-exempt charter. So we became the Romero Institute. And we've been that 501c3 for the since 1992, basically. So now we've got the New Paradigm Institute, which is a wholly integrated project of the Romero Institute. So they can contact us at newparadigminstitute.org. And the key that people want to sign up for is to become a member of Citizens for Disclosure. Now, Citizens for Disclosure is going to be working specifically on getting the Congress to force the executive branch to disclose what it is they've got. We've already seen how feckless they can be on that. So that's not all we're going to be doing. We're not going to stop doing that because we believe in strengthening the constitutional structures of our government. But we're going to be moving to have direct activity, reaching out to the ET people themselves, through these CE5 activities and establishing contact with them, having diplomatic relations with them, no matter what the government says.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for your time today. Genuinely, this is been fascinating in every which way, and I could speak with you for another 5 hours. And I hope you do come back and we can chat more.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to do that.
This is wonderful. I really appreciate it. Everyone go check out New Paradigm Institute, Romero, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Terrific.
Thank you, brother.